Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
It was the middle of summer and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in the Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up until 3 in the morning playing my console, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone scrolling through social media when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained and trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So the stairs to the kitchen are pretty tight and walled in. I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is very old and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the stairs. So when I get to the second to last stair, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a scared cat, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid and just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the weirdest position someone could put their arms in I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how creepy this situation was, but in the moment I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping / pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I ran up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob. Almost without thinking, I immediately called the cops and, nearly in tears, told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. The guy was standing outside of my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the operator on the phone was asking, "Hello, are you there? Hello." I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually the light returned to the gap and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays my parents don't even leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock on the house before going to bed. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, let's never meet again. So this happened in 2011, so the exact dialogue may have escaped my memory a bit, but the situation is something I'll never forget. Also, AIM was still pretty active during this time, and so was video chatting. This is important for later. I was on an online dating site and was talking to this guy. I was 31 at the time, he was 28. We talked for about 6 weeks before I gave him my phone number, and we took it online to calling and texting for another couple of weeks. 2 months after our initial chat we were texting, and he told me that he was out having a few beers at a bar near my house. He asked what I was doing and asked if I wanted to come out, but I had a very long day at work and didn't feel like like going to a bar. I invited him over to my place, which was stupid in hindsight, and after he finished at the bar he accepted. I figured I would be okay since I do keep firearms for protection and know how to defend myself if needed. I also had a webcam. I took a shower so I wouldn't smell like a water buffalo on a hot day, put on some makeup and got dressed to wait. He then called and said he was outside of my house. I clicked record on my computer's webcam program and turned off my monitor and wait to let him in. It's around 10 at night and he comes in and we go back to my bedroom because my living room was being remodeled. We're sitting on the bed chatting for about an hour, talking about everything under the sun. The conversation flowed. He was very handsome and so easy to be comfortable with. We got on the subject of firearms and I showed him mine. About 15 minutes later he asks for some water, so I go to the kitchen to get him a bottle. When I came back, he said he got a phone call and had to leave. After he left, I looked on my nightstand where I put the firearm down after showing him and noticed that it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, thinking I had put it down somewhere else. Nope, not there. I then played back the recording from my webcam program and sure enough, it shows him grabbing it and putting it in his hoodie. I was terrified at that point. He knew where I lived, he had my firearm, and he left his phone on my bed. Right then his phone rings and I answer it. Come to find out, he's married. His wife was calling him wondering where he was. I told her everything, including the fact that he stole my firearm and I had video evidence and was calling the police on him. Next thing I know, he's banging on my door, my firearm in his hand, asking me for his phone. The conversation went like this: him, I need my phone, give me my phone. Lee, not opening the door but yelling through the window, take the magazine out of my gun, empty the chamber, throw the magazine into the bushes, the one in the chamber across the road, and put it on the ground. Him, no, give me my phone. Lee, I'm on the phone with your wife at the moment and I have you on video stealing from me. I put his wife on speaker. Wife, a whole bunch of expletives. He gets shocked, runs and gets in his car, then comes back, telling me he threw my gun in the ditch. At this point, I make him empty his pockets, take his pants off, take his hoodie off, and show me that he doesn't have my gun on him. All the while, his wife is on the phone and I go outside and get in his car, in the driver's seat, and tell him to take me to where he threw my gun. He proceeds to tell me that I don't know how hard it is for him, being a felon, not being allowed to own a gun ever because of a mistake he made. The mistake, domestic violence, with a gun. We get up the road. He tells me my gun is there in the ditch. Then I realize the situation I'm in. I can get out of the car and go get it, leaving him to do whatever to me if he chose. He was about 6'4" and I am 5'3", or I could make him go get it and take a chance of him seriously hurting me. I took that chance since I was on his phone with his wife and my phone with the police. He retrieves my gun, brings it back to the car, and I drive back to my house and wait on the police. I get out of the car and he gets in the driver's seat. I'm still on the phone with the police. I walk around the back of his car to get his license plate number and he just puts his car in reverse, hits me, and takes off. They found him later that evening. He still had the magazine and one in the chamber in his pocket, so now he's enjoying time in prison. My mom's dog, Punky, was a very sweet, loving dog. She was an emotional support animal dog, but trained to be a service dog for post-traumatic stress disorder before she lost her leg. I had never seen her get aggressive with anyone in the entire 12 years she lived. She never growled or nipped anyone, and she had no sense of smell, so she loved all animals and people, a real gentle giant among our little terriers at 60 pounds. What I'm getting at here was that her barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once. I, an 11-year-old girl, was at home with my siblings who are 2 and 6, and my then stepdad is at work, and my mom ran up to the gas station to grab a pack of cigarettes. For reference, we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer in the middle of the woods on a dead-end road at the time, and you had to really make an effort to get down our road, find our house, navigate down our narrow driveway, and find the door. I'm sitting at the computer having a grand time watching videos when all of a sudden all of our dogs, about 2 Boston Terriers and 1 Chihuahua, perk up, bark a few times, and start investigating down the hall. My siblings were napping in the bedroom at the end of the hall at the time, so I figured they just stirred and scared the dogs. But then Punky sits up suddenly, stands up on the couch, and puffs her chest out. Her ears are perked up, her fur standing on end, her tail straight up, and then she barks. Loudly, I mean, the bark booms through the living room and echoes around, and all of a sudden she lunges off of the couch and goes tearing down the hallway. I'm already on edge because I don't think I've heard her bark, ever. She's a Basenji mix, so her bark is more of a baying sound, but this was a big, loud, alert bark. I stand up and go to look down the hallway, ready to fight off what I'm assuming is a shadow monster in the hallway based on how the dogs are acting. But then I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. We didn't get visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 11-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The only people who showed up were family, and they didn't knock, so I slowly walked towards the door. The knock drew the attention of the dogs, and they came running back down the hallway, all except for Punky, and I felt better with with our 3 yappy dogs in the room with me, even if they were all the size of New York City sewer rats. I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch is the sketchiest man I think I've ever seen. I can still picture him perfectly. He was a really thin, taller man with dark hair and a sunken face, bags under his eyes, and this half-managed hair, sort of like he just gave it a quick brush and then figured it was good enough. Everything about him seemed just a little too thin, a little too shallow, and his clothes were all off too. They were nice, but fake nice, you know, like a clean, newer looking shirt and new jeans, but he had what looked like a suit jacket on. All his clothes were dark too, despite the fact that it was summer in Texas and the weather was definitely in the hundreds of degrees that day. He also had this plain, unlabeled bottle in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and taped over. I stare up at him in confusion because I definitely don't know this man, and I ask what he wants. He smiles at me in this way that's way too fake, like this exaggerated and forced grin, and he spoke in the same voice retail workers do. Hey there, kid. I'm trying to sell this here carpet cleaner, and he shakes the bottle at me. Mind if I come in to show you how good it works? Alarms are going off in my head because he just seemed so off. Looking back with an adult perspective, the fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home was unnerving, because he probably knew they were, and that's why he was here in the first place. I should have told him to get off our property, that I'd have to go get my mom, something except what I did say, but I didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, no, we don't have carpet. Well, it works on other things. And he took a big step towards the door and shook the bottle at me. I start to freak out and think to close the door, but the thing is, our front door didn't even lock, so that's basically useless. I'm sure there's something very wrong about to happen, and I'm terrified as I think about what to do in the few seconds I think I have before it does happen. When all of a sudden I hear it, Pucky had crept up from the hallway, lowered towards the ground with her teeth bared and snarling like she was feral. She had slobber just dripping from her mouth, her ears were down and she was ready to pounce. The guy hears it too, and as I look towards Pucky, she tries to lunge past me and I just barely catch her with my leg as she tries her hardest to duck past me and attack this guy. He freaks out and runs off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway as I let Pucky out along with the rest of our dogs and they start chasing him. Our small dogs chase him down the driveway and stop about halfway, barking and jumping about, but Pucky stops just on the porch and watches him with her ears perked, just staring in the distance until he disappears. I swear I saw someone join up with him running when he got onto the road. The second he disappeared, Pucky's entire body language changed and she went back to being the sweet dog I knew, no barking or growling, just laying around, mouth and throat covered in slobber still. I realize my siblings are still down the call and run to check on them, and when I get to the bedroom, my siblings were sleeping soundly still, but the bedroom window was wide open, the curtains pushed all to one side, and the items on the dresser in front of the window all shoved around. Someone had tried to climb through the window, no doubt in my mind about it. From what I can gather, the bedroom window was visible from the couch where Pucky was sleeping, so I think someone was trying to climb through the window before Pucky went after them and scared them off, and the man at the door was meant to distract me. They definitely didn't expect Pucky, a bigger dog, because most of the time she was with my mom inside while her small dogs were the ones that saw public eye more often. I don't know what they intended to do, but after my mom got home, she took all of us to my aunt's house, and on our way there we saw the men walking up someone else's driveway. Men plural, because we watched a second one split off to wait by the road. So, to the two men apparently going door to door to sell their unlabeled carpet cleaner, I'd really rather not meet again. At the time this happened, I was a 13-year-old girl, so this happened 2 years ago and I was fairly naive. I was a major introvert and only friends with a few people in my class. I wanted to be social, but I preferred to be alone and read or write. Classic nerd things. In early November, I got a text on my phone that was from a few classmates whose phone numbers I had and around 1 or 2 I couldn't recognize. It was a group chat, asking if we wanted to hang out at night near a park at our school. My parents, being strict and paranoid, would never let me go. Luckily, or what I thought was luck, they were heading out for an overnight trip. They would be back around 4 in the morning and everything fell into place. Once my parents left around at about 8, I ran out the door and made my way to the park. The one thing I made sure to do was lock the door. My parents were paranoid after all, and it was their biggest thing that they engraved into me. Once I arrived at the park, I noticed a creepy figure near the edge of the woods. No one else seemed to notice it. I didn't mention it though to anybody else there. The night drew on and on. I was having the time of my life, ignoring the gut feeling I had telling me to run. Every so often often I would look over my shoulder and the man would still be standing there. Around 9:45, 4 out of the 10 people there had to leave due to their curfew. It was getting cold and was nearly pitch black with a few street lights every so often. The rest of us decided to go as well since it felt more eerie and quiet. The place we were hanging out at was a field that was fenced in with a few exits and entrances. A large wide field with a small park in the back and our giant middle school behind us. The front of the field faced the empty road and the right and left sides were surrounded by forest. All of the people left were getting picked up by cars, meaning that they went the opposite way of the road since that's where the parking lot was. The man stood by the right forest/road exit that I needed to take to get home. I walked away from my group. The man was probably early 40s, late 30s, dark hair with a beard. He was probably around 5'9", but at the time it seemed like he was 6 foot. He stood about 10 feet from the exit I had to take, so when I got close enough to it, I ran for about 30 feet through the exit and through the woods. Once I felt safe enough, I started to quickly walk through the woods, or at least get to the road. I heard a snap and a crunch from behind me. I stopped walking for a second and quickly checked over my shoulder. Around 15 feet behind me stood the very same man. He was walking slowly behind me, almost as if he was trying not to be suspicious, but it only made my fear worse. I turned around and walked so quickly I was basically jogging. I lived about 10 minutes away from the park we had hung out at and I wasn't athletic enough to run home. After around 7 minutes of walking fast, I was in my neighborhood. I knew that I could run to my house if I had to, so I checked to see if he was still trailing behind me. To my horror, he was only 5 feet away. I ran faster than I've ever ran. I could hear his footsteps behind me thumping across the concrete as he ran too. I dove down an alleyway I knew well and tried to lose him in a park, making my way home longer. I could hear his heavy breath followed by his footsteps as he tried to keep up. I cut through houses, backyards, and front yards. I finally made it to my house and flew up the steps. I looked behind me and he had just arrived at the bottom of my stairs. I unlocked the door and burst through it, shoving it closed behind me, and I heard him hit the door with his whole body. I ran around the house and locked all the windows, turned off the lights, and hid in my bedroom with a kitchen knife, just in case he got in. He didn't, luckily. If this was a better world, that's where my story would end, but it doesn't. After a few months, I haven't really told anyone what's happened since I don't want to get in trouble with my parents for sneaking out or anything. I didn't go out with anyone or any group anymore and my loner status returned. I began to write horror stories as a coping mechanism and never went out past 7. It was around February when a classmate of mine was sharing a story of some random man following her home on the bus. She described him almost the exact same as the man who had chased me home. Another girl mentioned that he sounded like the guy who stood outside the school and tried to follow her home. I didn't join him, but everyone agreed that he was just a weird guy. He was kind of forgotten, and eventually I moved on too. Around May, I was getting ready to walk to school when my mom pulled me aside and showed me a picture of a man. The guy who stalked me actually. She told me that he had been taken into custody 2 weeks ago for assaulting a child and had escaped last night. She told me to keep an eye out for him and to call the cops if I saw him. I was shaking the whole time I walked to school. It haunts me to know that if he had caught me, I would most likely be in her position or even dead. So, creepy nighttime stalker who liked to hunt down young girls and assault them, let's not meet again. For context, I'm in school still and work for my family member on certain weekends at a local college selling concessions at the stadium. It's about once or twice a month and the stadium is off towards the edge of town. It's Friday night. I just had gotten out of school and I had to go straight to work. I get to work for 4 hours, a half shift tonight, and my boss, who is my aunt, tells me we need more spoons for tomorrow's event. We sell ice cream, and these events have like 5,000 plus people at them. I say okay, I'll go grab them on my way home. The only store open with heavy duty spoons is all the way on the other side of town, and I still wanted to go meet up with some of my friends and mess around. I decided to take the faster but more sketchy way around the outskirts of town. I live in a weather bipolar state. It snowed last night, but I figured the roads would be fine enough even if they weren't plowed. I take off to the store and the first 5 minutes go by and nothing is wrong. I haven't seen a single car or any buildings the entire time, but keep in mind it's approaching 9 in the night and I'm on the outskirts of town. And no one really takes this way in case they really have to. All of a sudden I see something in the corner of my eye and it looks like a man, roughly 5'8" I'd say, wearing shorts, a shirt, and a backwards hat. He's in the ditch, walking in snow when it's 10 degrees out. My first thought is to pull over, but I'm on the phone with my mom at the time and she warns me not to as some things have happened before in this town. An example, a couple years ago a college girl was kidnapped and found dead rolled up in a rug in 2014. I consider stopping, but for some reason I tell myself not to. too. I wasn't really worried about anything. I'm a young dude driving a big pickup truck. Last type of person anyone would want to harm, right? I passed the man, going about 40 miles per hour. I drive not even 500 feet past him, and immediately, a car that I did not see at all before turns on and pulls out of a field entrance off the road and starts to follow me. At first, I thought I just was focused on the man in the ditch and didn't see a road, and that's where they come from. But I later found out there was not a road there. Now, again, I'm not super worried. I didn't feel it was a threat yet. I start to approach the town again and have to take some turns to get where I'm going. I turn left, the car turns left. I turn right, car turns right. I go around a roundabout and skip my turn and go twice as no one else was there. Car follows. At this point, I start to worry a little, but maybe they just need to go to the store also. I then pull up to a stop sign. Keep in mind, I wasn't on the best side of town either, may I add. I turn without my turn signal. The car follows. Now, at this point, I should have went straight to the police station, but I still didn't think much of it. I'm 2 miles from the store, where plenty of people will be. I take a few more turns, and the car continues to follow me. I completely blew a stop sign at a non-busy intersection, and the car does a quick stop and go and catches up. At this point, I'm 2 turns until the store, so I'm still not worried. I turn into the store, and the car turns also. The store also has a gas station, so I pull there first to act like I was getting gas. The car sets off to the side of the road, in between the gas station and store, and just sits there. I wait about 10 minutes, and the car doesn't move. At this point, I start to get worried. I'm a young kid alone at night near the bad side of town. I call my friends I'm supposed to meet up with later on, and give them the license plate for worst case scenario, then take off to the store. I cross the street, and the car comes straight behind me. I'm freaking out on the phone, not knowing if I should call the cops or not. I go and park as close as possible to the store, and the car parks 3 rows behind me and a couple down. It's getting late at this point, and the store's closing soon. There's only a couple others in the lot. I turn my truck back on and go park on the complete opposite side of the lot. Get out, and I completely bolt inside of the store. I'm not super overweight, but I'm not skinny either. I'm about 6'1" and 200 pounds. Who would want anything to do with me? I get spoons, take my time in the store. I go to call my friends to walk back outside, and my phone is dead. I look out the sliding doors, and suddenly there's a white van next to my driver's side. Looks like no one's in it, but the back windows are covered and it's running. Big red flag. I run to customer service and explain everything, but they think I'm some young kid messing around. At the time, I didn't see the original follow car, but no way am I going outside with that van next to my truck. After waiting what seemed like hours, in reality about 30 minutes, the van pulls forward and the original car appears from the side of the building. They came from the in-store Starbucks window and talked, and both drove off. I wait another 10 minutes and dash outside. I speed to my friend's house, and when I get there, I park in his garage. My one buddy asked why there's a big orange mark on my tire, and my heart sinks. When I was inside, the follow car must have marked my tire. After inspecting rest of truck, we find a small pipe dropped in the bed of my truck surrounded by snow. It was about 2 inches wide and I'd say about 18 inches long, wrapped in duct tape. It was not Mike. I was alone, no phone, scared, in a part of town I'm not familiar with. I try to laugh it off, but now that everyone's asleep I can't help but think what would have happened if I walked outside. I've always been sort of ego boosted on the fact I'm a chubby fat dude that no one would want to mess with, but after tonight I realize anyone can be targeted. This takes place around 10 years ago when I was like 8 or 9. I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood in what was at the time a really run-down city. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad at the same time, just a few bad apples in the tree. Anyways, enough background on the neighborhood, now onto the main story. My friends and I loved to play outside. It was the only thing we could do. No one in the neighborhood could afford any sort of electronics or any sort of fun machine to play with. We loved to just run through people's yards, cutting through houses if they just so happened to leave their door open. Now looking back on it, it is probably the dumbest thing kids our age could have been doing in a neighborhood like that. This story has nothing to do with running at people's houses, just wanted to let you know how dumb of kids we were. Well, on one fateful day, we were playing hide and seek with 4 of us hiders and 1 of us a seeker. We thought it would have been a funny idea to go to the other side of the neighborhood so that the seeker could never find us and we'd win. We like to call that part of the neighborhood the ridge part because they had 2-story houses over there and a forest with a creek in it. We were just doing our usual thing, cutting through people's yards and jumping fences, when we heard the loudest scream maybe 4 or 5 houses down. After hopping off the fence that we had just jumped, we all stopped and looked around wondering where it came from. I noticed that one of our hiders weren't with us anymore. 3 of us left. "Where's the sec?" I exclaimed. We heard the scream again. I pointed towards where the sound came from and we all jumped back over the fence we just jumped from and ran towards the scream. When we thought we got to the spot where the screaming was coming from, there was nothing there but an empty plot of land in the forest. We all started to get scared. Did Isaac get lost in the forest? Did he get taken back there? Then we heard the scream again. It was definitely Isaac. I decided to be the man of all the other 8-year-olds and go into the forest to make sure Isaac was okay. As I started my way into the trees, I did one last look at my friends and saw how horrified their faces were. I knew at the moment that I was definitely the only one that could go down into the forest. Making my way in, I could feel all the heat in my body fading and some sort of dread starting to take over. As I walked further and it started getting darker and harder to see, I was whisper yelling my friend's name. He responded in the most shaken up voice down here. Be quiet. I finally got to him and asked him what happened. He told me this story of how he got tired of running and decided to take a break on the curb to catch his breath, and that instead of being out in the open and risking the chance of being caught, he decided to go into the woods and hide. He said that after like 5 minutes after he sat down he heard talking, nothing that he could make out, just random nonsense. He looked around to see a man in a black hoodie hiding behind a tree on the other side of the creek staring at him. But the man took off before my friend could even get up to run away, and this is where he said he started screaming at the top of his lungs and hid somewhere else in the forest, which is where both of us are now hiding. And I kid you not, as soon as he told me this, we heard a twig snap. We both look up to see the man looking for us in some of the shrubbery on the forest floor. I couldn't make out any facial expressions or anything on his face. For a matter of fact, I could see he was holding some sort of blade. I couldn't tell if it was a stick or a machete. All I knew is that we needed to run, so when he turned his back we got up and started running. We didn't care how loud we were, we just knew that we needed to run. We got out of the forest and told all of our friends to run as fast as they could down the street. We kept running until we got to the other side of the block and we all turned around to see the street empty. No one, not a single car, and from a distance you could hear a roar, or like a very loud engine. Shortly after that initial roar, a silver Mustang with the darkest windows comes peeling around the corner faster than I've ever seen a car go, headed straight towards us. I've never had my body tighten up like it had at that very moment when I knew it was the same guy from the forest. I told all my friends to split up and run into people's yards to hide, so as we were all hiding and running through alleyways and jumping fences you can still hear his engine. It was like he was targeting only me. I can't even tell you how far I ran. I got to the point where I didn't even think I was in my neighborhood, but still I hear his engine coming up on me, so I ran more. I was exhausted. The sun finally started to set and I could hear his engine fade, almost like he had forgotten about me or just had given up. I start making my way back home scared out of my mind, checking my back every so often to make sure I wasn't being followed. Once I made it home, I went right to bed to cry myself to sleep, and for months after that, that silver Mustang would follow us, stalking every corner that we played on. We'd see it at our school, at the grocery store. It could have been a coincidence that our little minds are now perceiving things around us, but either way I think he was stalking us. Nothing actually came of him following us. He never did what he did that first day, but it was still so scary seeing that car everywhere we went. This happened to be last summer. I'm a 20-year-old woman. I went to the thrift store with my boyfriend who is 20 years old, and as we were heading back home, I suggested we pick up some sushi for dinner at our nearby grocery store. As my boyfriend works night shifts, he was already feeling tired and suggested that I go to the grocery store while he goes back home. We live in the busy part of our city where the mall, library, city hall, restaurants, and major stores are. They're all a couple of minutes away from our home. Not to mention, I live in a relatively safe city with little crime, so I was more than alright with going by myself. Now, I truly wish I hadn't. As we parted ways, I was walking through the parking lot of the grocery store when a stocky man, about 6'5", probably in his early to mid-40s, approached me. With a wide smile and wider eyes, he said, "Wow, you are stunning." I simply thanked him and tried walking away. He cut me off, saying, "I have never seen someone as beautiful as you before." I was immediately filled with dread. I looked back, hoping my boyfriend was still in sight. No luck. I was starting to feel cautious. Not to mention, with his eyes and smile, he honestly reminded me of a buffer Art the Clown from Terrifier, minus the clown costume and lack of talking. The man roped me into a one-sided conversation, asking me my name and how old I was. I gave him a fake name and told him I was Nati. He laughed and said, unnaturally excitedly, "That's good. That means you're a true woman now." My boyfriend later told me I should have lied and said I was under 18, as this may have made the man not interested. From the red flags I got from the man, I seriously doubt that. He then stuck his phone out, asking for my number. I refused, saying I had a boyfriend, and "I just want to talk to you." I repeated that I had a boyfriend. It was unnerving how his smile never wavered, despite showing that I I wasn't interested, like he wasn't understanding, or he just didn't care. He sounded confused, but still grinning. He stepped towards me and asked, "So you don't want to cheat on your boyfriend?" As if to say, "What do you mean you don't want to go out with a scary man that's double your age?" Speechless, I stepped back and gave pleading looks to the people walking in and out of the grocery store. After the last time I refused, his smile suddenly dropped while he placed his hand on my back, saying in a now cold, firm tone, "Come on, I have a nice car I can drive you around in. Let's check out one of these restaurants." Seeing a person's entire demeanor change with the flip of a switch was something I only saw in movies/television shows, and seeing it in this situation terrified me. Going into panic mode, I somehow found the courage to push myself off of them and almost shouted, "Sorry, I really have to go buy my groceries." Noticing that people were staring at us, his sick smile reappeared and said with a low voice, "Alright then, I'll see you later, insert the fake name I gave here." I practically ran into the grocery store with so much relief. I glanced back, hoping to see him get in his car to try getting his license plate number, only to see the man just standing in the middle of the parking lot, leering at me. I called my boyfriend in the store, but it kept going to voicemail. I figured he was sleeping, and I was seriously scared to walk back home. I managed to calm myself down in the store, figuring the man must have been long gone. Yet, I was on high alert the entire walk home. It was starting to get dark, but I figured if I just stayed cautious and walked quickly I would be fine. I couldn't be more wrong. When I was approaching the crosswalk that led to my street, I heard a car pulling up to the sidewalk, followed by a sickeningly familiar voice barking, "Hey, hi, hey, hi." My heart dropped into my stomach. I glanced sideways at the car. With his unmistakable, now malicious looking grin plastered on his face, the man's upper body was leaning out of his car window as if he was trying to reach out to me. He tauntingly called out, "So where's your boyfriend?" While cackling, I figured it was best not to acknowledge the man. My mind racing while trying to appear composed, I knew I couldn't lead him to my house, and turning back to go to the mall or stores may have given away that I was terrified and trying to escape. Bless whoever designed my neighborhood, as the city's center was conveniently right next to my complex. I ignored him and casually crossed the street, quickening my pace as I headed into the center. I tried not to look back, scared that I would see the man running up on me with his wide grin, but I made it to the center and finally looked behind me. I assumed the man would have followed me in or waited for me in his car. Instead, he sped away down a street opposite from my house. With so much relief, I called my boyfriend, who woke up to my call. I was on the verge of breaking down, but managed to fill him in on everything. He rushed to the center, and after he helped me calm down, we walked home. My boyfriend asked if I got the man's license plate number, to which I felt like an idiot. Not only was it too dark, but I was too consumed with fear for my own life that it didn't even cross my mind at the time. At the very least, I called the police, giving them a description of the man and the make and model of his car. They said they would do what they could, but I haven't heard back from them. I haven't seen that man since, not in person at least. At the same time, I feel so grateful that the man never found out where I live. But for all I know, he could be lurking around, trying to harm other women like he tried to that night he almost trailed me home. For mine, and the women in my city's sake, I hope I don't have to find out. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 in the morning each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood in a very wealthy town/suburb. Employees had to park in one of two parking lots at either ends of the property, and the lot I chose was adjacent to a long and windy road outside the resort which lead to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and resort were separated by a short range of brush and trees that no one ever walked through. I'd arrived one morning per usual and put the car into park with my headlights still on. The lights in the lot were ever on in the morning since no one else really showed up before 6 in the morning when the sun was out, so it was usually always dark at the start of my walk. Save for security, I was one of the first employees to arrive on the property each morning and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different. I had my hand literally at my keys, my brain in the process to turn off my car, when I noticed a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15 years old, come scampering. Her body language was the exact definition, run with quick light steps, especially through fear or excitement. Through the span of trees that separates the resort from the outside road, she was directly in front of my car, and my headlights illuminated a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was in high school, had long, blonde hair, and was wearing a jacket with pajamas maybe, like she just walked out of a house. One thing about her that bothered me was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car, but she was visually giggling at something I wasn't aware of or could see, and it was so unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her as if someone else were there waiting away from the headlights. She then waved at me like it were a normal gesture at this time and then immediately ran to my passenger side door. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening besides my anxiety spiking. I know I simultaneously yanked the speaker cable from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panicked for never remembering if it's up or down to lock when the girl began pulling violently and incessantly on the door handle on the passenger side. I realized because I didn't turn my car off, it had stayed locked. She began pounding on the window, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this were some type of game, as if I were a silly friend not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped the pounding and trying to open my car door. Her face fell flat like I disappointed her, and she started to walk away from my car back the way she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees, out of the view of my headlights. This whole encounter confused me almost as much as it scared me. Most people I told the story to just chalked it up to her being on drugs, but that narrative hasn't felt right to me despite her behavior. Maybe she was just being an extremely out of touch teenager whose parents need a firmer grip on her. I didn't call the police, and I regret that. I'll never get out of my brain though how off the feeling was watching a stranger, seemingly alone, pop out from the trees in the darkness laughing, and then try to violently enter your car in an empty parking lot. I do think the possibility of someone else being present the whole time is a lot more scary, and I wonder who else was there and where exactly. My mother was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base around the late 2010s, and being a military child at the age of 12, my life had reset once again. I didn't have friends again, and I had to learn an entire new neighborhood. I didn't really have anything that made me ecstatic, that is, except the Pokemon League held on base. It was ran by a few people who earned their judge cards from Nintendo and held tournaments and just open game nights. It was really fun picking up the card game, playing in the video game. They even had a small gym and Elite Four system. I made a lot of friends, and one of them was one of the judges, who I am thankful still to this day, because if it wasn't for him, I may not be here right now. The judge in question, who we will call the professor for the sake of anonymity, was a nice dude. He was the youngest of the three and wore a white professor getup. He looked maybe on the edge of his teens, early 20s with dark hair and glasses and a skinny frame. He was extremely helpful to newcomers, sort of like the big brother we could all look up to and strive to be in our children's cars and video games, even if his game name of the professor was a bit nerdy even for me. He was always one of the last people to leave, helping to clean up, and he supposedly lived nearby. This last thing is important for what's about to happen. It was a bit of a colder night when the event ended. I was sitting outside in the parking lot, scrolling through memes my friends texted me as I waited for my parents to arrive to pick me up. I was just kinda zoning out as the time clicked by when I heard someone nearby. Hey girl, you play Pokemon? I would look up at some really big dude, kinda chubby looking. I saw him every now and then in the events, and he didn't really stand out too much. I give a small nod, said yeah I do, as he gives this wide smile, like creepy wide. He starts walking forward, and I am hit with this nasty stench, like bad body odor. I blink a bit as I see he's walking from a black sedan with its back door open. I got this cool card collection. Come here, let me show you. Now, my parents have always taught me stranger danger, but my kid brain thought, hey, he went to events and I saw him, so he should be fine, at least so I thought, until he grabbed my wrist and started to drag me to the sedan. To say I immediately started screaming is an understatement. Stinky didn't care though. He was still dragging me, saying how I will have fun and throwing out things about trading cards, like someone listening would think that he was dealing with a whiny kid. I honestly thought that I was going to be taken and I would never see my mom and dad again, that I would be on the back of a milk carton and never seen again. Silly, I know, but I was rather sheltered about dying and death at that time. Thankfully, the professor had walked out at that very moment, presumably on his way to walk home. All I know is I hear the sound of fabric hitting this dude's face as the professor had swung his professor coat right into the dude's face. I feel his hand go to where the dude's grabbing my arm, and I see his hand grab Stinky's pinky finger and yank back. Hard, Stinky let go and yowled like an animal as Professor pushed me back behind him as he yanked his coat off of the dude. He then kicked at the back of the dude's knees as he caused him to buckle as Professor grabbed his wrists and pulled back on them. Stinky groaned and even more pained as Professor looked at him with just a cold look in his eyes. The big brother figure was gone and something else in its place, and I think I was a bit scared of it. Professor's tone of voice when he spoke didn't help either, like icy daggers lingered with his words against Stinky. If I see you back here, or doing this stuff to my charges, this will pale in comparison to what Japanese prisons will do to you. Stinky would scramble away and get into his car and peel out of the parking lot, Professor glaring at him until he was out of sight. sight. He would then guide me inside of the venue and buy me some fish and chips and sit down with me until my parents arrived. That cold persona he had when he kicked that dude was gone, back to being the big brother I knew. To be frank, that frightened me. I didn't quite understand why the teenager was so aggressive. I only later learned that the professor was a black belt who taught kids how to defend themselves with his mother at the local activity center. I suspect he had something of a protective persona or something in his own life led him to act in such a way. He explained the situation to my folks when they arrived. I wasn't allowed to go to the events and leak as much as I used to, but did from time to time. The professor was still his normal self at the events and helping people, but he would stop coming to the events a year afterwards, his license having expired and his father moving out of the country soon. Reaching about the same age as he was, and with a little sibling on my own, I sympathized with how, for a brief moment, he became something terrifying just to make sure I was safe. Oh, and as for Stinky, he never showed up to the events and he was either banned or just scared of the professor. I wish the professor a good life and I hope he is doing well. As for the Stinky guy, I wish that we never meet ever again. I was a 17-year-old girl at the time, and my boyfriend, who was named Joe, is 19, his brother Joe is 16, and his friend Doug is 20. Lee and my boyfriend just did a major cleaning of my house. To celebrate, we wanted to go to the creek on our day off to relax and enjoy ourselves. The creek we went to was secluded, outside of the town and in what we call distracts. There was never very much traffic and not many houses in the surrounding area. This creek is amongst the more popular hangout spot when it gets warmer, but it's government property and open to public. It's really hard to get into in almost a mile walk to make it going through ruts and big pond like mud puddles, so you were forced to walk it if you didn't have a truck that was especially good at mudding and easy to maneuver. The last person we heard attempting to drive down the path flipped their truck and no one ever attempts to drive down it. It was later in the evening and getting dark, so we were going to try to build a fire to warm up after we swam. We were there maybe 30 minutes when we start hearing trucks and seeing lights in the woods like someone was driving down the path to the creek. When we arrived, no one was there and the last car was leaving. We soon see this lanky man stumble down the path with a bottle of whiskey. At first, we thought he might have been a teenager around our age just trying to find someone to hang out with and stumbled across our path. It was just a coincidence. We soon learned he was a 26-year-old guy and we told him our respected ages, which was the first flag because he offered us alcohol even though we're underage. Although proven not to be poison or anything, it was just strange. He was very persistent with helping us start our fire. He mentioned how he could go grab his machete out of his truck to chop the branches or to go to his camp where he had 5 gallons of hand sanitizer. But soon after he mentions going to get the hand sanitizer, he mentions that he hasn't been to the creek in a while lately, about a year. My question is though, who has hand sanitizer in large quantities stored at a camp that is not permanent or permitted since it's government property? As we continue to talk and kind of learn a little bit about each other, this man was meticulously not telling us who he was but with anything we said he would relate to, like living on the same road as my boyfriend when he lived with his dad, but my boyfriend didn't know who he was even though we live in a small town with a small population. Only after my boyfriend had mentioned it. Also said he was from the same town I grew up in, which was almost 2 hours away in a very populated town, so seemingly like a serial peer or trying to relate to us to gain our trust. Eventually he asked why we haven't asked him his name yet, and we proceeded to not tell us anything about his name or who he is, but claimed that we have done this all before, like we have been in the same place with him before doing the same thing. We have not been to this creek in almost a year, and I only went one time before and do not remember him. He acted like he was stuck in a time loop. He claimed that he knew us all already. I just moved to this town and don't know very many people and stay very much so to myself, so I remember a lot of the people I meet. What made it worse was the smiles he was giving all of us when no one else was looking. It was bone chilling, and he knew we were kind of freaked out of him and he would make sly comments that we didn't really pick up on. After that we decided it was time to leave as Joe had school in the morning. As we were walking up the bank of the river, the man whispered into Doug's ear that if we kept asking questions we were going to find out something we didn't want to, and mentions how we are all scared of him and that he can tell, and tries to more sarcastically defend himself, seemingly making it worse because we could sense the danger. This man persisted that we get in the truck and ride with him, and when we denied he wanted us to sit on the tailgate, which we denied again, he wanted to have us walk in front of the truck so we could use the headlights to see. We eventually convinced him that we would walk behind, and he said he would go walking speed and let us keep up. He then starts making my boyfriend help him jump his newer model truck at the time that was beat up. We finally get the truck going, and Joe at this point is shaky with me and starts getting noticeable uncomfortable when the man starts making persistent remarks about how he should get in the truck with him and ride so he didn't have to walk. We didn't allow him to get in the truck and the man stopped asking. After that we start walking at a slow lurch, not seeming to look away from him through his back glass. When a bigger mud puddle comes up he stopped and told us to back away from the truck and turn around, like he didn't want us to get covered in mud, but said it in a remarkably weird name that set off about 100 buzzers in my brain. I personally didn't look away from the truck, not even a second, and when the truck was far enough away where it was slinging mud we went back to following. At that point he is driving faster, so we are having to use flashlights to keep going to catch back up. He stopped and let us keep up and then sped off again to where he would wait until we were about vision distance away and skirted out to the road. We still had about a 5-minute walk, extremely anxious because we didn't know if there were people with him waiting for us to make it to the car. We made it to the car and not seeing a trace of the guy or his truck and quickly get into the car to leave. As we are pulling out to leave, we see the dude seemingly been parked at the bridge waiting for us to leave. He then followed us down the road and we eventually lost him and all made it home safely. We still don't know his intentions were for that night and nobody else knows who he is, and I can't seem to find him online. And the only other information I know of him is that he is known to creep around town and tries to hang out with other teenagers in town. Whether or not he was harmless but drunk and coming of wrong, or an escapee from a mental institution, I hope me or anyone else ever have to cross paths with him again. We will no longer be going to the creek after dark or back to that creek in general. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. When this took place, I, a 20-year-old woman at the time, was finishing my degree in the city and working as a casual receptionist at a firm. One of the employees, Nick, told me one day that one of his clients, who he said was a stand-up guy, thought I was very cute and wanted to see if I would be okay to give him my number. We went to dinner and he was charming enough. He was in the medical field and was about 7 years older, but I didn't mind as my own parents had a similar age gap between them. We talked about my studies and he told me he thought my rather run-of-the-mill family life was amazing because his life was so different. He was adopted as a baby and his father was abusive. When he was 15, his mother left and he never saw her after that. He was kicked out at 18 and ended up in a terrible car accident in his early 20s. For a long time, he stayed at a relative's house and worked to support himself. Yeah, a heavy conversation on the first date, but all I felt was this overwhelming no-eyed compassion for this poor human who had been through so much. He seemed nice, was smart, handsome, and though he was just a touch too serious, given his life I figured that was understandable. We ended up dating, but by about the 3rd week, things started feeling a bit weird. He refused to introduce me to any of his friends because his last ex had left him for a friend. He also hated that I had male friends because of the same reason, and he would insist on reading any texts I sent or received from them. I made excuses in my head for him like, people need to heal, or sometimes they need a crutch before they learn to trust, or well, it's not like I have anything to hide. He started being critical of the way I spoke or acted and dressed. He was also super insistent we move in together, but I felt it was way too soon. In arguments, sometimes he would get a weird look in his eyes that made me feel unsettled, and I once tried to break the tension by half joking, "You look like you want to hit me," to which he responded, "I wouldn't bother if it came to that. I would just kill you." I was so shocked I didn't even react to that until days later. Recounting it, red flags everywhere, but though it might be hard to believe, I was actually convinced I was falling in love with him. Most of the time he was perfect, until he wasn't, but he would explain that was only because he had so many issues from his past, and I would believe him. Then one day, I told him what I thought was a funny story about a random guy in my class who asked for my number. This guy had asked under the guise of getting notes for classes he'd missed, but I only offered my college email address, explaining that I had a boyfriend. Hilariously, as soon as class ended, I saw this guy annoyedly throwing the paper I wrote my email on in the bin on his way out of the lecture hall. I expected my boyfriend to laugh, but he lost it. He accused me of leading the guy on, accused me of wanting to cheat. I was furious because I knew I had done nothing wrong. When he angrily threw a mug at the wall which shattered, the whole argument came to an abrupt halt. I was scared and angry, so I grabbed my bag and bolted out of his apartment. I thought he would stop me, but he didn't. I went home, cried about it to my cousin, who is 30 and who I was living with, and assumed it was over. Days passed and I hear nothing from him, and within those days I started questioning everything. Suddenly it was clear as day that this relationship was toxic and very unhealthy. Even if he did have a tough past, it wasn't my job to fix it, and it wasn't an excuse for the way he treated me. I was starting to accept that this was just a horrible near miss and get over it when he texted me, groveled apologies and how much he missed me, and I made the mistake of responding. He called and I picked up, but it was because I wanted to tell him I still thought it wasn't going to work out. He cried, yelled at me, asked me how I could do this to him when I knew that everyone he loved in his life had abandoned him, and how could I do the same? He told me he would never be able to love again and that it was all my fault. I had broken him. He told me that he had given me everything, but I was leaving over such a small argument. Then he apologized and told me he was trying to change and to give him another chance. I was bawling my eyes out. I felt like the worst human in the world, but I held tight to saying that it was best we moved on and that I was sorry. He ended the call by telling him I had ruined his life. Nothing happened for a while except for texts here and there where my ex would apologize, tell me he missed me, explain that he realized he made so many mistakes, stuff like that. I would tell my cousin who I was living with about him, and she would firmly tell me to not respond. She was sure it would stop eventually. One day I finished work as usual and headed to the station. It was a busy day and the streets were scattered with other people. As I walked I had this weird urge to look behind me, and when I did I saw my ex. There was a little distance behind between me and him, but when I saw him, our eyes locked. He looked different, a bit out of it, and I thought maybe he was drunk. I decided I would deal with him at the train station as it was always crowded and I wanted to talk to him only in a place where there were lots of people. I figured the yelling and crying would not be as intense that way. When I reached the station, I stopped and waited for him to catch up to me. He stopped about 2 feet away and I expected him to start apologizing again, but he said nothing. He just stared at me. Awkward seconds passed and I said, "Look," but that's all I got out because his arm moved slightly as he took his hand half out of his pocket and I saw he was holding a very small knife. I froze and vaguely remember thinking that I wanted to run, but it was like my brain and body shut down. I can only describe it as if there was a fog in my brain and I just couldn't move for what felt like ages. I just stared at him and I still remember how his eyes just looked so blank. I don't know how long that lasted, but then without saying anything, he turned and left. Nobody else had noticed. I remember numbly getting on the train. I started second guessing if that even happened. Hindsight tells me I was in shock. As soon as I got home though, I burst into tears. My cousin calmed me down and helped me call the police. In the end, the security cameras were placed in a spot that could clearly show that he had a weapon, so the police couldn't do much. Thankfully, I didn't see my ex again. I ended up quitting my job, changing my number, and eventually moved away to another city. To my ex, let's never ever meet. To the guy who asked for my number in class, thank you. You might have saved my life and definitely changed it. This story happened a few months ago. At that time, I had moved out of my house for a professional reason, but I had to wait a couple of months before moving into my next house. To spend this time span, and since I could work from anywhere, I rented my very close friend Amy's holiday family house, which is otherwise empty, located in a village I grew up in the countryside. I know this family and their house very well since I was a small child. The house is rather large. It has 2 floors and 5 bedrooms. It is located in a quiet, or even remote, area of the village, only surrounded by forest and other empty holiday houses. While planning this, I was aware this setting could be scary being a single 27-year-old woman, but I hate to restrain myself in life because of unjustified fears, so I instead took a few measures to feel more safe. Before moving in, I had planned to go on a complete checkup of all the doors and windows. Once done, I would look into every room, under every bed, and inside all the wardrobes. This way, I could be certain that the house was perfectly empty at that moment, and would stay so as I would be very careful with closing doors and I knew there were no spare keys, so that when at night I would be scared, I could reason with myself and know that it is only in my head. I was accompanied by my mother to proceed to the checkup, as she lives close by. We faced a problem rather quickly while verifying doors and windows. 2 glass doors from the patio were malfunctioning, and one could just slide them open. The layout of the 2 doors was the following. One was looking towards the garden, the second one was between the patio and the rest of the house. This meant someone could not only get inside the patio from outside, but also in the rest of the house. After this discovery, I called my friend Amy and we agreed I would find a locksmith. Amy's family's financial situation isn't at its peak, so depending on the price, either only the door leading to the garden, either both doors would get fixed. But the price was reasonable, thus the locksmith lady could change both locks. The patio was then perfectly sealed. However, according to her, the glass door leading to the garden was weak and one could easily open it if motivated. But since the glass door between the patio and the rest of the house was safe, I did not mind that remark. One could have as much fun as they pleased in that patio as long as I was safe in my house. After that, in a successful second checkup, I was happy to move in. The first days were a bit scary, but since I was careful with doors and the house's surroundings were so peaceful and lovely, it quickly became bliss to live there. I was heating myself with the fireplace, eating good food, breathing fresh air. I felt very free and happy, only I had to notice a small odd detail in the very first days. A third glass door was not locking anymore. I got very surprised since I checked so carefully every single door during my checkup. This third door was right next to the one I got repaired, between the patio and the house. So this meant that the patio was not perfectly sealed anymore, but fine, I thought. All the doors leading to the outside were still locked, so no need to worry. I quickly moved on since I felt so happy there. I did not want any useless fear to bother me. I came to the conclusion I must have missed it, and I was a bit ashamed that I got Amy's family to spend money on 2 locks whereas it should have been 3, because of my carelessness. After 2 wonderful months living a dream, mostly on my own, since all my childhood friends moved out from the village, a friend came to visit me. We spent some time outside, and we had a drink at my place before I drove him back to his village, about an hour away. While we were leaving my house, he even emphasized how meticulous I was with closing all the shutters behind ourselves. I told him it was key for me to feel so good in there. I was back home at around 10 at night. I entered my perfectly sealed house and locked the door behind myself. While turning the key, out of the blue, sudden and intense goosebumps ran all over my scalp. I had never experienced such a feeling, and I was not even aware that the human body could get goosebumps onto the scalp. With that came a very instinctive feeling of danger and being on my guard. I felt all of this so intensely that I was not able to not ignore it, yet I knew that my house was kept perfectly closed. So I stayed cautious, but I walked through the entrance and came into the kitchen. Here, on the floor, was laying a rectangular plastic bag. It was small and blue on the orange floor. I was surprised. I recognized it being a plastic bag to be filled with water to make ice cubes. It had nothing to do here. I had already seen these bags earlier. Once I was looking for freezer bags to put my food, and I mistook them. I knew they were stored at a drawer at the very other side of the kitchen, and I knew we did not use them, nor anything from that drawer, with my friend earlier. This uncanny discovery confirmed my gut feeling, and I began to feel very uneasy. I sent a picture to my friend asking if he had touched or used these. He said no. I grabbed a knife and I started walking in the living room. Usually, whenever I would feel afraid in this house, I would go on a little checkup tour in every room to reassure myself. That is what I had in mind at that moment, but this gut feeling was literally forbidding my body to do so. Instead, it walked me out of the house. I drove to my mother's place and slept there. A few days after, during a sunny afternoon, my mother and I came back and did a checkup thoroughly. Nothing was missing, nor broken, and no one was there. Everything stayed exactly as I had left it. With such evidence, I came to the conclusion it must have been my friend who, by accident, took those bags and forgot about it. Then they must have fallen on the floor while I opened the door or something like that. I came back in and kept living a dream in this beautiful place for another month after that. Then something else happened. For a few days, I had been hearing unusual noises which began to scare me, so I decided it was time for a checkup. It was around 9 at night. I began going in every room, looking under every bed. Downstairs, all clear. I walked upstairs, opened the first bedroom, and surprise, the light was on. This caused me a small flinch. I never go to these rooms upstairs and they remain closed all the time. Nevertheless, I walked towards the wardrobe, but before opening it, I get a second flinch as an unknown object is now laying on top of the furniture. I open it, nobody. I close it, and I look at the object. It is an elongated black fabric sheath, rather big, with a hook to carry it on a belt. A terrifying idea crosses my mind that it may be a knife sheath, but I brush it off, as I don't need my imagination to get crazy in such a situation. I finished my checkup, but despite nobody being found, I could not help but feeling weird about the sheath and the light. I went to sleep at my mother's place that night too. The day after, I checked with my friend Amy. No family member came into the house while I was away, nor did they recognize this object as belonging to any of them. I dropped it at the police station, and according to them, it is likely a hunting knife sheath indeed. Then, I started thinking again at the patio's third door. It had been coming in my mind for some weeks, but I had been dismissing the idea to avoid unnecessary fear. Reflecting back at my thorough entrance checkup, it is very unlikely that I would have missed a door. As well, the locksmith had changed the lock of the door right next to this one, and even stared at it to see how a well-functioning lock looked like. With Amy, we had first imagined that an old Airbnb tenant could have made a copy of the keys and the locks had to be changed. But more and more I was sure the person was coming in the house from the patio. Another locksmith came and looked at the third door's lock. She said, oh yes indeed. The lock part screwed on the door frame, where the lock embeds itself, had been screwed off. She also checked the door leading to the garden, and her colleague had pointed out as easy to open. She said that's obvious, meaning in her laconic way there was very little chance for all that to be a coincidence. I left the house for good after that. I believe a person had their little habits in this house, using the way I shut when I arrived, and they made sure to be able to reach inside the place despite my changes. Thinking that all this time I was living my life peacefully, reasoning with myself not to be scared, that the place was safe and locked, it actually was not. This story takes place in a very small town in the northeast region of the United States in the summer before I went off to college in 2015. After I graduated high school, my parents decided to move to a smaller, more affordable house about 40 minutes north into the mountains. We stayed in my childhood home because the public schools in my area were the best in the state, and my parents really valued my education. I ended up going off to an amazing university, and now I have an incredible career because of my excellent education. As most people in the United States know, amazing public education usually means higher property taxes. My parents got to the point where they could not afford the taxes on their 4,000 square foot home anymore and decided to sell it just after I graduated from high school. Their home is humble, and it sits on a beautiful piece of land on the side of a beautiful mountain. The trees are always so green, and there is a lot of wildlife around. They don't have many neighbors either, as their driveway is about 1.5 miles long, but this is what they chose to live in after I went off to college. In August of 2015, we moved into this new house. I wasn't planning on staying long as I was getting ready to head off to college as a freshman for the first time. We decided to have a little housewarming party with a bunch of family friends and my best friend at the time as well. My dad was manning the barbecue, my mom was making drinks, we were playing with our dogs. It was a grand time, and everyone had so much fun. My dad had built a brick fire pit in our backyard. Just to set the scene for you here, the fire pit was about 30 feet from our back patio door, and we had a picnic table and other seats all around. Behind the seating was the tree line. It was so dark sometimes at night, you needed a flashlight to see 10 feet in front of you. With the fire pit lit, you couldn't see someone unless they were either sitting next to you or across from you in front of the pit. My best friend decided to stay the night, and we asked my dad if we could make s'mores. As it was getting a little chilly as it does in the late summer in the northeast at night, my parents left us outside with my dog, Nino. Nino was a huge 100-pound black lab / pit bull mix. He was such a loyal and incredible dog that my dad trained as his right hand. He was our protector as he could run extremely fast, was very strong, and alerted us when something went bump in the night. Side note, he passed away a week before I got married in 2022. He was 17 years old and lived an adventurous life with my parents, hunting squirrels, laying out in the sun, and running amok. Nino laid in between us, facing the tree line, and my best friend was to my right. Our backs were to the dark, dense tree line. Our first mistake, we were laughing, joking, and eating s'mores together, planning for the future, and generally excited about going off to college together. She decided to play some music, and we just relaxed, feeling content and at ease. It was the perfect summer night, until Nino started growling. I saw his ears perk up and his head jerk to the side. He then sat up and continued to growl. My best friend and I both looked at each other, thinking Nino just saw a stray animal or something non-threatening. This area was known for lots of deer and rarely a coyote or wolf. As he was trained to help my dad hunt deer, we assumed it was a buck or fawn in the distance behind us. We went back to singing along to the music playing and talking about our fall 2015 class schedule. Again, Nino started growling. Our second mistake, we did not call out for my dad. We didn't even think there was a problem until Nino started barking repeatedly. This time, louder and more vicious. He stood up and started barking as if alerting us to activity beyond the tree line that we could not see. We stood up as well, the fire obscuring our view. My best friend took her phone, paused the music, and turned on her flashlight. She started to walk towards the edge of the tree line with Nino by her side, still growling and barking, alerting us to not go any further and to call for help. We stood still in silence, listening. I was too afraid to even breathe at this point. She started walking into the woods, and when she shined her flashlight, she saw a figure, someone peering behind a tree. A man with a green shirt and green pants on, about 5'11" with glasses too. We screamed and ran as fast as we could inside, leaving the fire unattended and this creepy man behind the tree. What we did not know at the time is where this man came from. We crashed through our front door, breathless with Nino tailing behind us, and startled my mother, who was washing dishes and cleaning up from the party. She was talking to my dad about something they saw on the news, and I think we cut him off mid-sentence to explain that there was a man dressed in all green lurking behind a tree in the woods. We didn't know how long he was there or if he was still there, but we were both crying. I remember feeling extremely sick, like I was going to throw up. My dad jumped up, grabbed his shotgun and headlamp, and ran outside with Nino. My mom gathered us into the living room, shut all of the lights in the house off, and locked the doors. She told us to be quiet and that she was going to call 911. As she did that, my best friend and I shook in fear. We were anticipating gunshots and screaming, but never heard any. My mom, now on the phone with 911, described what we saw to the operator. I heard my mom say "oh" in an alarming way. At this point, my dad came back inside, and my mom let him know that the police were on their way to us. Being in a small town on the mountain with less than 10,000 people means that we don't get our own police force. We get the state police every time there is a call made to emergency responders. My dad put his gun away and waited outside for the police to show up. To our bewilderment, then, they didn't just send one police officer, but 10 and an entire SWAT team and helicopter to circle the area. We were rightfully terrified. I was practically having a panic attack at this point. The police officers came inside our home and asked my best friend and me what the man was wearing, what he looked like, if we were able to discern any scars or tattoos. We explained the weird matching green outfit and the glasses. The officer excused himself and alerted the police and SWAT members outside of our description. They started to search the woods behind our home with guns drawn, flashlights, and the helicopter circling above. They advised us to stay inside and that they would let us know when / if they found something. After about 25 minutes, we got another knock on our door. It was not one but 2 officers this time, and my dad let them in and they began to explain the situation. One officer explained that we must have seen on the news that a convicted felon from the prison about 20 miles away escaped into the mountains. The police set up a perimeter 10 miles around the prison, but the convict escaped them yet again. The outfit the man was wearing as well as our description signaled to them that the escaped convict was 100% lurking through our remote, densely wooded backyard that night. The all-green outfit was a standard issue for prisoners in my state then. They did not, however, find the man near us after 25 minutes of searching. He was still out there. The officers let us know that they were going to have a squad car stay and watch our house for a few days as they were unable to locate the fugitive, and believe he is still an active threat to our safety. That night and for 3 nights after that, we all slept in the living room together. My dad's shotgun was within arm's reach of him at all times. Later that week, we got another knock on our door from the officers stationed outside of our home. They let us know that the man was back in police custody and that we were safe. They advised us to get security cameras and how sorry they were that this happened to us. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. I've always been an adventurer at heart. The thrill of discovering new places, especially those untouched by the modern world, has always been irresistible to me. This passion led me to explore many off the beaten path locations, but none was as haunting as the old road in the outskirts of my hometown. It was a road that everyone seemed to have forgotten about. Overgrown with weeds and barely visible, it was said to lead to an abandoned village that had been deserted for reasons no one could remember. Local legends spoke of strange occurrences, of people who ventured there and were never the same again, but I dismissed these as mere tales to keep curious kids away. One summer evening, armed with a backpack, a flashlight, and my camera, I decided to explore this forgotten road. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced with the gentle breeze. The chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds accompanying me. As I walked further, the surroundings became eerier. The trees seemed denser, and a thick fog began to roll in, reducing visibility. But I pressed on, driven by curiosity. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon the remnants of the abandoned village. Dilapidated houses, overgrown with ivy, stood as silent witnesses to a time long gone. I began to explore the houses, each telling its own story. Old photographs, children's toys, and other personal belongings were scattered around, as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry. But as I delved deeper, an unsettling feeling grew within me. It felt as if I was being watched. Shaking off the feeling, I continued my exploration. But as I entered one particular house, the atmosphere changed drastically. It was colder, and a pungent smell filled the air. In the living room, I found a journal, its pages yellowed with age. The entries spoke of a happy family, of daily life in the village. But as I flipped through, the tone became darker. The writer spoke of strange figures seen at night, of whispers in the wind, and of villagers disappearing without a trace. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house. I jumped, my heart racing. I strained my ears, trying to identify the source. It sounded like footsteps, but not of a human. They were uneven, heavy, and seemed to come from all directions. Panicking, I grabbed my belongings and rushed out of the house. The fog was now so thick that I could barely see a few feet ahead. The footsteps grew louder and closer. I ran, my breath ragged, my mind racing. Every shadow, every rustle of the leaves made me jump. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the familiar outline of the main road. Relief washed over me as I sprinted towards it, but just as I was about to reach safety, a figure emerged from the fog. It was tall, with long, spindly limbs and glowing eyes. It stood there, watching me, its presence paralyzing me with fear. Mustering all my strength, I screamed and threw my flashlight at it. The figure recoiled, and I seized the opportunity to run. I didn't stop until I reached my car, parked at the beginning of the forgotten road. The weeks following my encounter were filled with paranoia. Every creak in my house, every unexpected knock on the door sent my heart racing. I became a recluse, avoiding social gatherings and staying indoors as much as possible. My friends and family grew concerned, but how could I explain the unexplainable? One evening, as I was trying to distract myself with a movie, there was a knock on my door. I froze, every fiber of my being screaming at me not to answer. But then I heard heard a familiar voice. It was Jake, my childhood friend. Relieved, I opened the door. Jake looked worried. "Hey, I've been trying to call you. Everyone's been talking about how you've changed since that trip to the old road. What happened?" I hesitated, then decided to tell him everything. As I recounted my experience, Jake's face grew pale. When I finished, he took a deep breath and said, "I've heard stories about that place, but I never believed them until now." He then shared a tale his grandmother had told him. The village, she said, was once a thriving community, but one day a stranger arrived. No one knew where he came from or what he wanted. He kept to himself, living on the outskirts of the village. But soon after his arrival, villagers began to disappear. Panic spread, and one by one, families left, leaving behind their belongings and memories. The stranger was rumored to be a practitioner of dark arts, seeking eternal life. He was said to have made a pact with malevolent forces, sacrificing the villagers in exchange for immortality. Over time, the village was forgotten, but the stranger, now a cursed entity, remained bound to the land. Jake's story sent shivers down my spine. It all made sense now. The journal, the footsteps, the figure with the glowing eyes, they were all pieces of a dark puzzle. Determined to find answers, Jake and I decided to visit his grandmother. She was a wise old woman, known for her knowledge of local legends. As we narrated my encounter, she listened intently, her face grave. When we finished, she spoke in a hushed tone. "The entity you encountered is bound to the village, but it can latch onto anyone who ventures there, following them, feeding off their fear." She then gave us a small amulet, claiming it had protective properties. "This might keep him at bay, but remember, such entities are cunning. Always be on your guard." Grateful, we left, the weight of the revelation heavy on our shoulders. I wore the amulet everywhere, and over time, the disturbances reduced. The footsteps grew fainter, and the overwhelming sense of dread began to wane. Months turned into years, and life returned to normal. But I never forgot that fateful night. The amulet became a constant companion, a silent guardian against the darkness. The old road and its sinister secrets remain, a chilling testament to the past. But one thing's for sure, some places, no matter how intriguing, are best left unexplored. I've always been fascinated by urban exploration. The thrill of discovering forgotten places, of uncovering stories lost to time, was an addiction. My city, with its rich history, provided ample opportunities for such adventures. But one place, in particular, had always eluded me: the old subway station beneath Fifth Avenue. Decommissioned in the 1960s due to structural concerns, the station had become the stuff of legends. Rumors spoke of it being haunted, of homeless people disappearing there, never to be seen again. Naturally, such tales only fueled my curiosity. One evening, armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a map of the old subway system, I decided to venture into the station. Accessing it was tricky. The main entrances had been sealed off, but after some research, I found a maintenance tunnel that would lead me there. The descent into the station was eerie. The air grew colder, and the only sound was the distant drip of water. As I stepped onto the platform, I was taken aback by how well preserved it was. The tiles, though grimy, still bore the intricate patterns of yesteryears. Old advertisements, faded with time, adorned the walls. I began to explore, snapping pictures and taking in the atmosphere. But as I ventured deeper, an unsettling feeling grew within me. I felt watched. Every so often, I'd hear faint whispers or see shadows darting just out of my line of sight. Trying to shake off the unease, I continued my exploration. That's when I stumbled upon an old train car. It was in surprisingly good condition, given the years of neglect. Curiosity piqued. I decided to take a look inside. The interior was pristine, as if the train had been in use just yesterday. The seats were intact, and the overhead lights, though dim, still worked. But what caught my attention was a newspaper on one of the seats. The date was from over 50 years ago, and the headline spoke of a train that had mysteriously disappeared in this very station. As I read, the temperature in the car dropped drastically. The lights began to flicker, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Panic set in. I rushed out of the train. My flashlights beamed dancing wildly as I tried to find my way back to the platform. But the station had changed. The once pristine tiles were now cracked and broken. The advertisements were gone, replaced by graffiti that read, "Leave while you still can." I ran, my breath ragged, the whispers now deafening screams in my ears. Just as I thought I was lost, I saw the maintenance tunnel up ahead. I sprinted towards it, not daring to look back. Emerging into the night, the cold air never felt so good. I made my way back to the surface, the events of the night replaying in my mind. Had I imagined it all? Or had I truly stumbled upon the resting place of the lost train and its passengers? I decided to research the missing train further. The records spoke of a train that had vanished without a trace, trains, along with all its passengers. Despite extensive searches, no trace of it was ever found. The incident was one of the reasons the station was decommissioned. The days following my harrowing experience were filled with unease. Every creak in my apartment, every unexpected shadow made me jump. Sleep was elusive, with nightmares of the station and its ghostly inhabitants plaguing my nights. One evening, as I was trying to distract myself with some TV, there was a knock on my door. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. To my surprise, it was an elderly woman, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp and alert. I opened the door, and she introduced herself as Mrs. Alina Gray. She claimed to be a historian, specializing in the city's subway system. Word had gotten around about my exploration, and she wanted to hear my account firsthand. Reluctantly, I invited her in and recounted my experience. As I spoke, her face grew pale, and she seemed lost in thought. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "I believe you, because you see, my grandfather was on that train." She went on to explain that her grandfather had been a businessman returning home after a late meeting. He had boarded the train at the 5th Avenue station, and that was the last anyone ever saw of him. His disappearance had devastated the family, and the mystery had haunted them for generations. Alina had dedicated her life to uncovering the truth. She had heard the legends, of course, but had always dismissed them as mere urban myths. But my account had changed everything. Together, we decided to delve deeper into the mystery. Alina's research led us to old city records, which hinted at a cover-up. The station's closure, it seemed, was not just due to structural concerns. There were reports of other strange occurrences, of maintenance workers hearing voices and seeing apparitions. Our investigation caught the attention of local media, and soon, others came forward with their stories. It became clear that the station was a hotspot for paranormal activity. Determined to find answers, Alina and I, along with a team of paranormal investigators, decided to venture into the station once more. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment, we set out one fateful night. The station was just as I remembered, its eerie silence amplifying every sound. As we explored, our equipment picked up on various anomalies. Cold spots, electromagnetic fluctuations, and even faint EVPs that sounded like distant conversations. But the most chilling discovery was in the train car. Our thermal camera picked up on multiple figures, seated as if on a journey. Alina, tears in her eyes, whispered that one of the figures resembled old photographs of her grandfather. We left the station with more questions than answers, but our findings reignited interest in the old subway system, leading to calls for its preservation as a historical site. Alina and I remained close, bound by our shared experience. We often spoke of that night, of the souls trapped in an endless journey, and while we never found definitive answers, we took solace in the fact that we had shed light on a forgotten chapter of the city's history. The 5th Avenue station remained sealed, a silent testament to the mysteries of the past. Let those who know its story speak of it with reverence, a reminder that some things are beyond our understanding. The first time I noticed him was on a crisp autumn morning. I was on my usual jogging route through the park, lost in thought, when a sudden movement caught my eye. A man, standing a little distance away, was watching me intently. His gaze was unwavering, and even from that distance, I could feel its intensity. Brushing it off as a random occurrence, I continued on my way. Over the next few weeks, I began to see him more frequently. At the coffee shop, the library, even outside my workplace. He was always at a distance, never approaching, just watching. His appearance was nondescript. Average height, brown hair, always dressed in a plain gray hoodie and jeans. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were unforgettable. Concerned, I mentioned it to my friends. They suggested it might be a coincidence or perhaps he had a crush on me. But something deep down told me this was different. This wasn't admiration, it was an obsession. One evening, as I was leaving work, I felt an eerie sensation, like I was being followed. Quickening my pace, I darted into a nearby store and watched discreetly from the window. Sure enough, he was there, standing across the street, his gaze fixed on the store's entrance. Panicking, I called the police. They arrived promptly, but by then, he had disappeared. They took my statement and assured me they'd keep an eye out, but without any overt threats or actions, there was little they could do. Determined to take matters into my own hands, I decided to confront him. The next time I spotted him, outside my gym, I walked straight up to him, my heart pounding. "Why are you following me?" I demanded. He looked taken aback, his cold demeanor faltering for a moment. I just wanted to be close to you," he stammered. His response sent chills down my spine. I warned him to stay away and informed the gym's security about him. They assured me they'd be on the lookout, but things escalated from there. I began receiving anonymous letters at my home, filled with ramblings about our connection and how we were meant to be together. Disturbingly, they contained details about my daily life, things only someone who had been watching closely would know. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a noise coming from my living room. Cautiously, I peeked out and was horrified to see him standing there, going through my personal belongings. I locked myself himself in my bedroom and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, arresting him on the spot. It turned out he had been stalking me for months, documenting my every move. He had a history of similar behavior with multiple restraining orders against him. In the aftermath of the ordeal, my trust in people was deeply shaken. Every stranger became a potential threat, every unexpected glance a cause for alarm. My once vibrant social life dwindled as I withdrew from friends and activities, seeking solace in the safety of my new apartment. But as the weeks turned into months, a realization dawned on me. I couldn't let one person's twisted obsession dictate the course of my life. I began attending therapy, where I met others who had faced similar traumas. Their stories, while unique in detail, echoed the same themes of violation, fear, and resilience. One woman, Lisa, had been stalked by an ex-boyfriend for years. He had used technology to track her every move, even hacking into her personal accounts. Another, Raj, had been harassed by a former colleague who believed they were destined to be together. Their stories were harrowing, but they also spoke of hope, of reclaiming their lives from the shadows of their stalkers. Inspired by their strength, I decided to start a support group. We met weekly, sharing our experiences, coping strategies, and resources. The group became a lifeline for many, a safe space to heal and empower one another. Word spread, and soon we had members from all walks of life joining us. We organized workshops on personal safety, digital security, and legal rights. We collaborated with law enforcement, ensuring that stalking cases were taken seriously and that victims had the resources they needed. One day, during a group session, a young man named Alex shared his story. He had been stalked by a woman he had met online. She had become obsessed with him, sending him hundreds of messages daily and showing up at his workplace. This story highlighted the fact that anyone, regardless of gender, could be a victim of stalking. Together, we launched a public awareness campaign, debunking myths about stalking and highlighting the importance of early intervention. Our efforts were recognized by local media, and soon we were invited to schools, colleges, and community centers to share our stories and educate others. The support group evolved into a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of stalking and raising awareness about the issue. We advocated for stricter laws and worked with tech companies to develop tools to protect users' privacy. As for me, the trauma of being stalked will always be a part of my story, but it's no longer the defining chapter. Today, I stand as an advocate, a beacon of hope for others facing similar nightmares. I've learned that while we can't control the actions of others, we can choose how we respond, and in that choice lies our power. I had always been drawn to older buildings. There was something about their history, the stories they held within their walls, that fascinated me. So, when I found an affordable apartment in a century-old building in the heart of the city, I was ecstatic. The building had its quirks, creaky floorboards, drafty windows, and an old-fashioned elevator that groaned with every ascent. But it was filled with character, from the ornate moldings to the vintage tiles in the hallway. My neighbors seemed friendly enough. There was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had lived in the building for decades, and a young couple, Mark and Lisa, who were always up for a chat in the hallway. But it was the man in the apartment next to mine, apartment 3B, that piqued my curiosity. I rarely saw him, but I often heard him. Late at night, I'd hear soft whispers coming from his apartment, as if he was talking to someone, but whenever I passed by his door, I never heard any other voices. It was always just him, whispering softly, his words indecipherable. One evening, as I was returning home from work, I bumped into Mrs. Patterson in the hallway. We exchanged pleasantries, and I casually mentioned the whispering neighbor. Her face turned pale, and she glanced nervously at apartment 3B's door. That apartment has a history, she said in a hushed tone. Many years ago, a young woman lived there. She disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and no one knows what happened to her. Some say the apartment is cursed. I chuckled, dismissing it as an urban legend, but Mrs. Patterson's words stayed with me, and that night, as I lay in bed, the whispers seemed louder, more insistent. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to introduce myself to the mysterious neighbor. I baked some cookies and knocked on his door. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s with disheveled hair and a gaunt face. His eyes, however, were the most striking, deep blue and filled with sadness. I introduced myself and handed him the cookies. He thanked me, his voice soft and melodic. We chatted briefly, and I learned that his name was Robert. He had lived in the apartment for a few years and kept to himself due to personal reasons. Feeling a bit more at ease, I returned to my apartment, but that night, the whispers grew louder. I could hear Robert's voice clearly, but there was another voice, a woman's voice responding to him. The conversation was heated, filled with anger and sadness. Concerned, I approached Mark and Lisa the next day. They too had heard the whispers but had dismissed them as the ramblings of a lonely man. But the mention of the woman's voice unsettled them. Determined to get to the bottom of this, we decided to approach Robert together. We knocked on his door, and after a few moments, he opened it, his face pale and eyes red, as if he had been crying. We expressed our concerns, and after a moment of hesitation, Robert invited us in. His apartment was filled with old photographs, all of a beautiful young woman with raven black hair and a radiant smile. "That's Emily," Robert said, his voice breaking. "She was my fiancée. We lived in this apartment together. One day, she went out and never returned. No one knows what happened to her." Tears streamed down his face as he recounted the days of searching, the sleepless nights, and the overwhelming grief. "I hear her voice," he whispered. "Every night, she speaks to me, telling me she is still here, waiting for me." We left Robert's apartment, our hearts heavy with sympathy. The whispers, it seemed, were a manifestation of his grief, a way for him to cope with the loss of his beloved Emily. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the whispers again. Only this time, they were coming from inside my apartment. I froze, my heart racing, as the soft voice of a woman whispered, "Help me." Terrified, I turned on the lights and searched my apartment, but there was no one there. The whispers, however, continued, growing louder and more desperate. The next morning, I approached Mrs. Patterson, seeking answers. She listened intently, her face grave. "The spirit of Emily is restless," she said. "She is trying to communicate, to tell her story." With her guidance, we held a seance in Robert's apartment. As we sat in a circle, candles flickering, the room grew cold. A soft voice, unmistakably Emily's, filled the room. "I never left," she whispered. "I'm still here, trapped, waiting to be set free." Tears streamed down Robert's face as he reached out, trying to touch the spirit of his lost love. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never stopped looking for you." The room grew warm again, and the presence of Emily faded, but the atmosphere was filled with a sense of peace and closure. Life in the city continued its usual hustle and bustle, but for the residents of the old building, things had changed. The whispers of Emily's story spread, and soon, our building became a point of interest for many. Paranormal enthusiasts, journalists, and the simply curious would often stop by, hoping to catch a glimpse or sound of the mysterious Emily. Robert, however, found it hard to move on. The seance had provided some closure, but the weight of his grief was still palpable. He would often be seen sitting by the window of his apartment, lost in thought, gazing at the old photographs of Emily. One day, as I was returning from work, I found a small crowd gathered outside the building. Whispered conversations and hushed tones filled the air. Pushing through, I discovered the reason for the commotion. Robert's apartment door was ajar, and inside, the room was filled with lit candles, casting flickering shadows on the walls. At the center, surrounded by old photographs of Emily, was Robert, lifeless. The shock and grief were overwhelming. The building, which had already seen its share of tragedies, was once again plunged into mourning. The police ruled it as a suicide, a final act of a man overwhelmed by his grief. In the days that followed, the residents came together, supporting each other in their shared grief. Mrs. Patterson, ever the pillar of strength, organized a memorial for Robert. People from all walks of life attended, sharing their memories and stories of the kind, gentle man who had loved so deeply. The building, with its rich history and tales of love and loss, became a symbol of the city's past. Efforts were made to preserve it, and soon it was declared a heritage site. Tours were organized, with the proceeds going to mental health charities, ensuring that Robert's story would serve as a reminder of the importance of mental well-being. As for me, the events of the past few months had taken their toll. I decided to move to a quieter town, seeking peace and a fresh start. But the memories of the old building, of Robert and Emily, and the lessons they taught me about love, loss, and resilience stayed with me. Years later, I returned to the city for a visit. The old building stood tall, a testament to the passage of time. As I walked its hallways, memories flooded back, but amidst the nostalgia, there was a sense of peace, a feeling that the souls who had once inhabited these walls had finally found their rest. And as I stood by the window of apartment 3B, I could almost hear the soft whispers of Emily, a gentle reminder of the love that once was in the legacy it left behind. Every morning, I'd take the same route to work, order the same coffee from the same cafe, and sit at the same park bench during my lunch break. This routine brought me comfort, a sense of stability in the chaotic world of city life. But it was this very routine that led me into the unnerving path of someone I wish I'd never met. It began subtly. I started noticing a silver sedan parked near my office building. At first, I thought nothing of it. The city was sprawling, and cars came and went. But then I began seeing it near my apartment, at the grocery store, and even by the cafe I frequented. The same car, always parked at a distance, never too close to arouse suspicion, but close enough for me to notice. One evening, as I was leaving work, I decided to approach the car. As I neared, the engine revved, and it sped away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, my heart pounding. The next day, I reported it to the police. They took note but mentioned that without a license plate or a clear description of the driver, there wasn't much they could do. Days turned into weeks, and the presence of the silver sedan became a constant in my life. I tried changing my routine, taking different routes, and even staying over at a friend's place. But like a shadow, it always found me. One day, as I was sipping my coffee at the cafe, an unfamiliar face approached me. A woman, probably in her early 30s, with jet black hair and piercing green eyes. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, pointing to the chair opposite me. I shook my head, and she sat down, introducing herself as Elise. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her. She was articulate, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Over the next few weeks, our casual cafe chats turned into dinner dates, and soon, we were spending a lot of time together. But as our relationship deepened, so did my sense of unease. Elise seemed to know a lot about me, details I had never shared. She'd casually mention a childhood memory or bring up a favorite book of mine, always brushing it off as a lucky guess or a shared interest. One evening, as we were watching a movie at her place, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way, I stumbled upon a room with the door slightly ajar. Curiosity getting the better of me, I peeked inside. The room was filled with pictures of me, from my childhood, my college days, and even recent ones from our dates. There were notes detailing my daily routines, my likes and dislikes, and even transcripts of our conversations. But the most chilling discovery was a set of car keys on the table. Car keys to a silver sedan. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and turned to find Elise, her green eyes no longer warm but cold and calculating. "I knew you'd find out eventually," she whispered. Panicking, I pushed past her and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I reached the safety of my own home. I immediately called the police, who arrested Elise on charges of stalking and harassment. The subsequent investigation revealed a chilling backstory. Elise had been obsessed with me for years, ever since we had briefly met at a college seminar. She had followed me, documenting my life, and had even moved to the city to be closer to me. The silver sedan, it turned out, was just one of the many ways she kept tabs on me. The weeks following Elise's arrest were a blur of police interviews, court hearings, and sleepless nights. The media caught wind of the story, dubbing it the obsession of the silver sedan. My once private life was now a topic of public discussion, with reporters constantly trying to get an exclusive. My friends and family rallied around me, offering support and a listening ear, but the weight of the ordeal made it difficult to connect with them. I felt isolated, trapped in a bubble of paranoia and fear. One evening, as I was aimlessly channel surfing, I stumbled upon a support group for stalking victims. The group, Safe Haven, offered counseling, legal advice, and a platform for victims to share their stories. Desperate for a sense of understanding, I decided to attend their next meeting. Walking into the community center, I was greeted by a diverse group of individuals, each with their own harrowing tale of obsession and violation. As I listened to their stories, I realized I wasn't alone in my trauma. The group became a lifeline, a place where I could be vulnerable without judgment. Through Safe Haven, I met Maya, a vibrant woman in her late 20s. She had been stalked by an ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept their breakup. We bonded over our shared experiences and soon became close friends. Together, we navigated the complexities of healing, often leaning on each other during our lowest moments. As the months went by, Maya and I decided to turn our pain into purpose. We started a podcast, Whispers in the Dark, where we shared our stories and interviewed other victims, experts, and law enforcement officials. The podcast quickly gained traction, shedding light on the often overlooked issue of stalking and providing resources for those in need. Our efforts caught the attention of local authorities, who collaborated with us to organize workshops on personal safety and the importance of recognizing the signs of stalking. Schools, colleges, and workplaces began implementing our guidelines, ensuring that individuals had the tools to protect themselves. Elise's trial was a grueling process. The defense tried to paint her as a misunderstood lover, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was sentenced to several years in prison and mandated to undergo psychiatric evaluation and treatment. As for me, the experience with Elise forever changed the trajectory of my life. From a victim, I had become an advocate, using my voice to raise awareness and support others. The silver sedan, once a symbol of my trauma, was now a reminder of my resilience and strength. Today, as I walk the streets of the city, I do so with a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows of the past still linger, but they are overshadowed by the hope of a brighter future, a future where no one has to live in fear of the unfamiliar familiar. I had just moved to a small town in Oregon for a fresh start. The town, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, was picturesque, with a tight-knit community that welcomed newcomers with open arms. I rented a quaint little house on the outskirts, surrounded by towering pine trees and the soothing sounds of nature. The first few weeks were uneventful. I settled into my new job at the local library, made a few friends, and enjoyed the peace and tranquility the town offered. But things took a strange turn one chilly autumn night. I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of my landline. Groggily, I glanced at the clock. It was exactly midnight. Confused and slightly irritated, I picked up the receiver. Hello. I mumbled silence, then a soft, raspy voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there, the weight of the call sinking in. It was probably a prank, I reasoned, trying to shake off the unease. But the next night, at precisely midnight, the phone rang again. The same voice, the same chilly message. This became a nightly ritual. Every night, at the stroke of midnight, the mysterious caller would deliver the same warning. I unplugged the phone, but the calls continued, now coming through my cell. I changed my number, but it made no difference. Desperate for answers, I approached the local police. They were sympathetic but mentioned that without more concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I keep a log of the calls and try to trace the number. One evening, after another unsettling call, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove to the town's only phone booth, located near the old gas station. To my horror, I found it off the hook, the receiver swinging gently in the breeze. I approached the town's historian, Mr. Jenkins, hoping he might shed some light on the situation. Over a cup of tea, he recounted a tragic tale. Many years ago, a young woman had moved to the town, much like myself. She lived in the same house I had rented and worked at the library. But one fateful night, she disappeared, never to be seen again. The only clue was a series of mysterious phone calls she had received, always at midnight. The story sent chills down my spine. The parallels were uncanny. I decided to delve deeper, visiting the town's archives and speaking to its oldest residents. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The young woman, Clara, had been in a relationship with a local man, Tom, but when she tried to end it, he became obsessed, stalking her every move. The midnight calls were his way of tormenting her, a game of cat and mouse. One night, in a fit of rage, he confronted her at her home, and she was never seen again. Tom was the prime suspect, but with no evidence and no body, he was never charged. Armed with this knowledge, I approached Tom, now an old man living on the fringes of the town. Our confrontation was intense. He initially denied everything, but as I pressed on, he broke down, confessing to the crime. Clara's body, he revealed, was buried in the woods behind my house. The police were notified, and Tom was arrested. Clara's remains were found, finally bringing closure to a mystery that had haunted the town for decades. The aftermath of Tom's confession sent ripples throughout the town. The community, which had for so long prided itself on its close-knit bonds and safety, was forced to confront the dark secret it had unknowingly harbored for decades. Many older residents remembered Clara, and the revelation brought a mix of relief and profound sadness. The local newspaper ran a series of articles on Clara, piecing together her life and the events leading up to her tragic end. I was approached for interviews multiple times, but I declined, wanting to maintain my privacy and process everything in my own time. However, the events had ignited a spark within me. The experience, as harrowing as it was, made me realize the importance of giving a voice to the voiceless. I decided to start a community group dedicated to revisiting cold cases and unresolved mysteries in the region. With the help of some friends and local enthusiasts, Echoes of the Past was born. Our group met weekly, poring over old newspaper clippings, police reports, and conducting interviews. They collaborated with law enforcement, providing fresh perspectives and resources to help solve long-forgotten cases. One case, in particular, stood out. A young boy, Jamie, had gone missing in the late 70s after a day out fishing. His disappearance had always been attributed to a tragic accident. Perhaps he had fallen into the river and been swept away. But as we dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. Witnesses recalled seeing a strange car in the area that day, and there were reports of a man acting suspiciously near the riverbank. With renewed interest in the case, the police reopened their investigation. Using modern technology, they were able to identify and locate the car, leading them to a man now in his 60s. Under questioning, he confessed to abducting Jamie all those years ago, a crime of opportunity that had haunted him ever since. The town hailed our group as heroes, but for us, it was never about the accolades. It was about justice, about ensuring that stories like Clara's and Jamie's were never forgotten. Years passed, and Echoes of the Past grew in size and scope. We collaborated with similar groups across the country, sharing resources and information. Our efforts led to the resolution of several cold cases, bringing closure to families who had waited decades for answers. As for me, the town of Oregon became my permanent home. The memories of the midnight caller and the discovery of Clara's fate would always be a part of me, but but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community. Today, as I sit on the porch of my new home, overlooking the serene landscape, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance at life, for the friendships forged in adversity, and for the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. I've always been a city girl. The hustle and bustle, the never-ending energy, the myriad of cultures and experiences, it was home. So when my job required me to relocate to a remote town in Montana for a 6-month project, I was apprehensive. The town, named Hollow Creek, had a population of just under 1,000 and was surrounded by vast stretches of forests and mountains. My new home was a cabin provided by the company located on the outskirts of Hollow Creek. It was rustic and charming, with a beautiful view of the dense woods. The first few days were an adjustment. The silence of the night, the lack of city lights, and the sheer isolation were both eerie and fascinating. One evening, as I was settling down with a book by the fireplace, I noticed something odd. A faint light, like that of a flashlight, was moving amidst the trees. It seemed aimless, zigzagging between the trunks, occasionally pausing and then resuming its erratic path. I watched it for a few minutes, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a hiker or a local out for a late-night stroll. I brushed it off and returned to my book. The next morning, I mentioned the incident to Mrs. Harper, the elderly lady who ran the local grocery store. She paused, a concerned look crossing her face. "It's probably nothing," she said hesitantly, "but be careful. These woods have stories, and not all of them are pleasant." Her cryptic warning stayed with me, and that night, I made sure to lock all the doors and windows. As darkness enveloped the cabin, I once again noticed the light. This time, it seemed closer, its movements more deliberate. I turned off the lights in the cabin and watched. After what felt like hours, the light finally retreated, disappearing into the depths of the forest. This became a nightly occurrence. The light would appear, sometimes close, sometimes far, but always there, always watching. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, a result of the isolation and the countless horror stories I consumed over the years. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One evening, as I was returning from the town, I found a bouquet of wildflowers on my doorstep. There was no note, no indication of who had left the flowers, though beautiful, sent a chill down my spine. I felt watched, observed from the shadows. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I set up a camera facing the woods. If someone was out there, I would catch them. The next morning, I eagerly reviewed the footage. The night was quiet until around 3 a.m. when the familiar light appeared. But this time, there was something more. A silhouette of a man, standing at the edge of the woods, just watching the cabin. He stood there for hours, unmoving, until the first light of dawn, when he retreated into the forest. The footage was undeniable proof that I wasn't alone. I handed it over to the local sheriff, a burly man named Officer Daniels. He promised to look into it and advised me to stay vigilant. That night, as I lay in bed, every sound was amplified: the rustling of the leaves, the creaking of the cabin, the distant hoot of an owl. And then another sound: footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the wooden porch. I held my breath, paralyzed by fear. The doorknob rattled, followed by a soft, persistent scratching, like someone dragging their nails on the door. The ordeal felt endless, but eventually the sound ceased. Morning came, and with it, the discovery of a note pinned to my door. "I just want to be close to you," it read in a scrawled, uneven handwriting. Officer Daniels increased patrols around my cabin and advised me to consider relocating, at least until they could identify the mysterious observer. But I was determined not to be driven out of my home by fear. A few nights later, the inevitable confrontation happened. I was awakened by the sound of shattered glass. Grabbing a baseball bat, I cautiously made my way to the living room. The sight that greeted me was the stuff of nightmares. A man, tall and gaunt, with wild eyes and a disheveled appearance, stood amidst the broken shards of the window. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. "You're even more beautiful up close," he whispered. Adrenaline kicked in, and I swung the bat, connecting with his arm. He howled in pain and lunged at me, but I managed to dodge and make a run for the door. The cold night air hit me as I sprinted towards the town, the man's enraged shouts echoing behind me. By the time I reached the sheriff's office, I was a mess of tears and exhaustion. The man, it turned out, was a drifter with a history of stalking and obsession. He had fixated on me from the moment I'd moved to Hollow Creek. The return to city life was both a relief and a challenge. The towering skyscrapers, the cacophony of traffic, and the sea of familiar faces provided a comforting cloak of anonymity. Yet, every shadow, every unexpected sound, and every glance from a stranger brought back memories of that fateful night in Hollow Creek. My friends and family were supportive, but they couldn't truly understand the depth of my trauma. Nightmares plagued my sleep, and I often found myself double-checking locks and peering out of windows, always on edge. One evening, as I was attending a support group for trauma survivors, I met Alex. He had been through a harrowing experience of his own, having been held hostage during a bank bank robbery. We connected instantly, finding solace in our shared experiences and the understanding that only someone who's been through a similar ordeal can offer. Together, we embarked on a journey of healing. We attended therapy, took self-defense classes, and even traveled, pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. With each challenge we overcame, the shadows of our past began to recede, replaced by newfound strength and resilience. Alex introduced me to the world of blogging. He had started a blog to document his recovery and found it therapeutic to share his story. Encouraged by him, I started my own blog, Whispers from the Woods, where I detailed my experiences in Hollow Creek and the path to recovery. The blog resonated with many, and I began receiving messages from people all over the world, sharing their own stories of survival and seeking advice. What started as a personal outlet grew into a platform for change. Alex and I collaborated, hosting workshops, webinars, and even a podcast focusing on personal safety, mental health, and empowerment. Our efforts caught the attention of various organizations, and we were invited to speak at schools, colleges, and corporate events. We emphasized the importance of being aware of one's surroundings, trusting one's instincts, and seeking help when needed. As the years went by, Hollow Creek became a distant memory, a chapter in my life that had shaped but no longer defined me. Alex and I, bound by our shared experiences, decided to take our relationship to the next level. We got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by loved ones, a testament to the fact that love and support can heal even the deepest wounds. Today, as I reflect on my journey, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance at life, for the love and support of those around me, and for the opportunity to make a difference. The silent observer from the woods, though a dark chapter, led me to discover my true calling and purpose. Life is unpredictable, filled with challenges and unexpected twists, but it's also filled with moments of joy, love, and resilience. And as I've learned, even in the darkest moments, there's always a glimmer of hope, a chance for a new beginning. Wren Street was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. A quiet suburban lane lined with cherry blossoms and well-kept homes. It was the last place you'd expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. But as I soon discovered, even the most idyllic places can harbor dark secrets. I had moved into number 23, a cozy 2-story house, after landing a job at the local high school. The neighbors were welcoming, often dropping by with baked goods or inviting me over for barbecues. It was the perfect fresh start. Walked into my new life, I began to notice something odd. Every morning, as I left for work, I'd find a single red rose on my doorstep. No note, no indication of who it was from. At first, I brushed it off as a kind gesture from a neighbor, but as days turned into weeks, the roses kept appearing. Curiosity piqued, I decided to set up a camera to catch the mysterious benefactor in the act. The next morning, I eagerly reviewed the footage. At precisely 3:17 a.m., a figure, hooded and barely visible in the dim light, approached my doorstep, placed the rose, and stood there for a few minutes, just staring at my front door before retreating into the shadows. The video sent chills down my spine. This wasn't a friendly gesture, it was something far more sinister. I approached the local police, showing them the footage. Officer Mitchell, a stern-looking man with years of service under his belt, promised to increase patrols in the area and advised me to be cautious. The roses stopped appearing, and for a while, life returned to normal, but the sense of being watched never truly left. I'd often catch glimpses of someone standing across the street, always obscured by shadows or hidden behind trees. Whenever I tried to approach, they'd vanish, leaving me questioning my sanity. One evening, as I was grading papers, I received a call. The voice on the other end was distorted, almost robotic. "You're so beautiful when you're focused," it whispered before hanging up. I looked out the window, and there, standing under the streetlight, was the hooded figure, phone in hand, watching me. Panicked, I called Officer Mitchell, who arrived within minutes. A thorough search of the area yielded no results. The watcher had vanished once again. Mitchell suggested I stay with a friend or family member for a few days, but I refused. This was my home, and I wouldn't be driven out by fear. The next day, I came home to find my front door ajar. Inside, my belongings were scattered, pictures taken off walls, and in the center of the living room, a bouquet of red roses with a note, "You can't escape me." The violation of my personal space was the last straw. I decided to take matters into my own hands. With the help of a tech-savvy friend, I set up a series of security cameras and alarms around my property. If the watcher dared to approach, I'd be ready. Weeks went by without incident. Just as I began to let my guard down, the alarms blared one fateful night. Rushing to my security feed, I saw the hooded figure trying to enter through the back door. I called the police and, armed with a baseball bat, decided to confront my stalker. The backyard was bathed in the glow of the security lights. The figure, caught off guard, turned to face me. For the first time, I got a clear look at my tormentor. It was a woman, probably in her 40s, with wild, unkempt hair and a manic look in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. She laughed, a chilling, unhinged sound. "You took everything from me. me," she hissed. Before I could react, she lunged at me, a sharp knife glinting in her hand. We struggled, the knife coming dangerously close. But before she could land a blow, sirens wailed in the distance, and she fled, disappearing into the night. The police launched a manhunt, and within hours, she was apprehended. The story that unraveled was both shocking and tragic. The woman, named Lydia, was the previous owner of my house. She had lost it due to financial troubles and had grown resentful of anyone who moved in, watching them, tormenting them, trying to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. With Lydia behind bars, peace returned to Wren Street. The neighbors rallied around me, their support unwavering. I decided to stay, refusing to let one person's madness taint my love for the community. I was approached for interviews multiple times, but I declined, wanting to maintain my privacy and process everything in my own time. The community, protective and tight-knit, shielded me from prying eyes, often forming human barriers when reporters got too intrusive. Lydia's trial was a somber affair. As details of her life emerged, a picture of a deeply troubled woman took shape. She had faced a series of personal tragedies, from the loss of her husband to a debilitating illness, culminating in the foreclosure of her beloved home. While her actions were inexcusable, there was a palpable sense of pity for her in the courtroom. She was sentenced to a mental health facility where she would receive treatment and counseling. The judge, in his closing remarks, emphasized the importance of community support and understanding mental health issues. Life on Wren Street slowly returned to normal. The media circus moved on, and the cherry blossoms bloomed once more. But the events had left an indelible mark on the community. Neighbors became more vigilant, often checking in on each other and organizing regular community watch meetings. I, too, underwent a transformation. The ordeal had shaken me, but it also made me realize the importance of understanding and compassion. I started volunteering at a local mental health organization, offering support to those in crisis and raising awareness about the importance of mental well-being. One day, as I was conducting a workshop, I received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, and my heart raced as I opened it. It was from Lydia. She wrote of her remorse, her struggles, and her journey to recovery. She thanked me for my understanding and hoped that one day we could meet, not as victim and tormentor, but as two individuals seeking closure. I pondered over the letter for days. Finally, with a heavy heart, I decided to visit Lydia. The meeting was emotional, filled with tears, apologies, and eventually forgiveness. We spoke of our lives, our dreams, and our shared love for Wren Street. It was a cathartic experience, one that allowed both of us to find closure and move forward. Today, as I walk the streets of Wren Street, I do so with a renewed sense of purpose. The memories of the Watcher, the roses, and that fateful confrontation will always be a part of me, but they no longer define me. Instead, they serve as a reminder of the complexities of the human mind, the importance of compassion, and the resilience of the human spirit. Wren Street, with its blossoms and close-knit community, remains a beacon of hope, a testament to the fact that even in the face of adversity, love, understanding, and community can heal the deepest wounds. My daily routine was predictable, from the morning jog around the park to the evening tea at my favorite cafe. It was during one of these routines that I first noticed him. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, always dressed in a crisp suit. At first, our encounters were fleeting. I'd spot him across the street while waiting for the bus or in the reflection of a shop window as I passed by. But as days turned into weeks, his presence became more pronounced. He'd be seated a few tables away at the cafe, pretending to read a newspaper but stealing glances in my direction. Or he'd be at the park, always on the same bench, watching me as I jogged by. Concerned, I confided in my friend, Jenna, who worked as a detective for the city police. She advised me to document these encounters, suggesting it might be a case of stalking. The next day, armed with my phone, I discreetly began taking photos of the man whenever I spotted him. The evidence was undeniable. He was everywhere I went, always maintaining a distance but always watching. One evening, as I was leaving work, I felt an overwhelming sense of being followed. Quickening my pace, I darted into a nearby alley, hoping to lose him. But he was relentless. I could hear his footsteps echoing behind me, getting closer. In a moment of desperation, I hid behind a dumpster, dialing Jenna's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm and reassuring. "Stay where you are," she instructed. I'm on my way. Minutes felt like hours as I crouched in the shadows, the man's footsteps growing louder. Just as he was about to discover my hiding spot, a car's headlights illuminated the alley and Jenna's voice rang out. "Police, stay where you are." The man froze, his face a mask of surprise. Jenna, along with two other officers, apprehended him, reading him his rights. At the precinct, the truth unraveled. The man, identified as Robert Langley, was a private investigator hired by my estranged father. My father, diagnosed with a terminal illness, had wanted to reconnect but was unsure how to approach me. Instead of reaching out directly, he had hired Robert to gather information, hoping to find the right moment to reconcile. While Robert's intentions were not malicious, his methods were undoubtedly invasive and unsettling. He was charged with stalking and given a restraining order. My father and and I eventually reconnected, working through years of misunderstandings and hurt. While the circumstances were far from ideal, they served as a catalyst for healing and rebuilding our relationship. The aftermath of the incident was a whirlwind of emotions. My colleagues at work, having caught wind of the story, were a mix of concerned and intrigued. They dropped by my desk, offering words of comfort or asking for details. The local news even reached out for an interview, but I declined, wanting to keep the matter private. Jenna and I grew closer after the ordeal. Our weekly coffee catch-ups turned into daily phone calls and frequent dinners. She became my pillar of strength, guiding me through the legal processes and ensuring Robert adhered to the restraining order. One evening, as we were having dinner at a local bistro, she handed me a letter. "This came in for you at the precinct," she said, her expression unreadable. The envelope was plain, with my name neatly written on the front. Inside was a letter from Robert. He wrote of his regret and how he had let his professional judgment be clouded by the emotional weight of the task. He had seen the pain in my father's eyes and I wanted to help, even if it meant overstepping boundaries. He apologized for the fear and distress he had caused and hoped that one day I could find it in my heart to forgive him. The letter was a mix of emotions. While I appreciated his sincerity, the trauma of being followed and watched was still fresh. I decided to put it behind me, focusing on mending my relationship with my father and moving forward. Months turned into years, and life settled into a new normal. My father and I took a trip together, exploring the countryside and rediscovering our bond. The time away was therapeutic, allowing us to address past grievances and build new memories. Jenna, ever the protective friend, occasionally checked up on Robert, ensuring he kept his distance. She informed me that he had left the private investigation business and was now working as a counselor, helping others navigate the complexities of relationships and personal boundaries. As for me, the experience taught me the importance of trust and the value of second chances. I began volunteering at a local community center, offering support to those who had been through similar experiences. Sharing my story and hearing others helped in the healing process. Today, as I walk the streets of the city, I do so with a renewed sense of purpose. The memories of the silent observer, the fear, and the reconciliation serve as reminders of the unpredictable nature of life, but they also highlight the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to overcome challenges, and the importance of understanding and forgiveness. In the end, it's not the events that define us, but how we choose to respond to them. And as I've learned, even in the darkest moments, there's always a glimmer of hope, a chance for a new beginning. When I moved to the quiet town of Maplewood, I was seeking solace from the bustling chaos of city life. The town, with its tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors, seemed like the perfect escape. I settled into a quaint cottage at the end of Birch Lane, surrounded by a thick canopy of trees. The first few weeks were idyllic. Mornings were spent sipping coffee on the porch, listening to the chirping of birds, while evenings were reserved for long walks, exploring the town's hidden gems. However, things began to change one foggy evening. As I was returning from my walk, I noticed a figure standing in the driveway of the house next to mine. The house had been vacant for months, so the sight of someone there was unexpected. The man was tall, with a gaunt face and piercing blue eyes that seemed to study me intently. I offered a friendly nod and continued on my way, but a sense of unease settled in. Over the next few days, I'd often spot the man, always at odd hours, either staring at my house from his window or standing in his yard. His gaze never wavering. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was probably just a curious neighbor. But things escalated one evening when I found a note pinned to my front door. It read, "I see you. Do summon it." The handwriting was erratic, and the message sent chills down my spine. Concerned, I approached Mrs. Henderson, an elderly lady who lived a few houses down and had been a resident of Maplewood for decades. Over a cup of tea, I described the man and his odd behavior. Her face turned pale as she listened, and she finally whispered, "That sounds like Albert." Albert, she explained, had grown up in that house but had moved away years ago after a family tragedy. Rumors had it that he struggled with mental health issues and had developed an obsession with the house, believing it held some secret about his past. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront Albert. The next morning, I walked over to his house and knocked. There was no answer, but I could hear faint whispers from inside. Taking a deep breath, I tried the door, and to my surprise, it creaked open. The interior was dark, with a thick layer of dust covering everything. Old photographs lined the walls, many of them featuring a younger Albert with a woman who bore a striking resemblance to me. My heart raced as I realized the depth of his obsession. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the top of the stairs. "You shouldn't be here," Albert hissed, his blue eyes now wild and unhinged. I backed away slowly, trying to calm him down, but he advanced, muttering about how I was the key to unlocking his past. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed a vase from a nearby table and hurled it at him, giving me just enough time to escape. I ran to my house, locking all the doors and windows, and called the police. They arrived within minutes, friends, and after a brief standoff, Albert was taken into custody. It was later revealed that he had been off his medication and had indeed developed an unhealthy fixation on the house and me, believing I was a reincarnation of his deceased sister. In the weeks following the incident, the town of Maplewood was abuzz with whispers and speculations. The once peaceful community was shaken, and the story of Albert and his eerie obsession became the stuff of local legend. Parents warned their children about the dangers of talking to strangers, and there was a noticeable increase in security measures throughout the neighborhood. I, too, was grappling with the aftermath. Sleep became elusive, with nightmares of Albert's piercing blue eyes haunting my dreams. Every creak of the floorboards or rustle of leaves outside sent me into a panic. The sanctuary I had once found in Maplewood now felt like a prison. Jenna, my best friend from college, insisted I come stay with her in the city for a while. A change of scenery will do you good, she said, and she was right. The hustle and bustle of city life, which I had once sought to escape, now provided a welcome distraction. The towering skyscrapers and crowded streets made me feel anonymous, safe. Jenna introduced me to her circle of friends, and I soon found myself immersed in a world of art galleries, theater shows, and late-night coffee sessions. Among them was Alex, a therapist who specialized in trauma counseling. Sensing my distress, he offered to help. Our sessions were intense, filled with tears, anger, and moments of clarity. Alex taught me coping mechanisms, ways to confront and process my fears. He also emphasized the importance of community and support, urging me to reconnect with the residents of Maplewood. With time and therapy, I began to heal. The memories of Albert and that fateful day started to fade, replaced by new experiences and connections. I decided to return to Maplewood, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The community welcomed me back with open arms. Mrs. Henderson, ever the doting neighbor, organized a potluck in my honor. Stories were shared, laughter echoed, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of belonging. I also started a support group for individuals who had experienced trauma. The group met weekly at the local community center, providing a safe space for sharing and healing. Through these sessions, I met others like me, each with their own story of resilience and hope. One day, as I was sorting through my mail, I came across a letter from the state's mental health facility. It was from Albert. He wrote of his remorse, his struggles with mental illness, and his hope for redemption. He thanked me for the compassion I had shown him, even in the face of danger, and wished me well. The letter was a stark reminder of the complexities of the human mind and the thin line between sanity and madness. It also underscored the importance of understanding, empathy, and the power of second chances. Today, as I sit on my porch, sipping coffee and watching the world go by, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the chance to rebuild and start anew. Maplewood, with its tree-lined streets and tight-knit community, remains a beacon of hope, a testament to the fact that even in the face of adversity, love, understanding, and community can heal the deepest wounds. The highway stretched out before me, a seemingly endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the vast expanse of the desert. It was late, and the only illumination came from the dim glow of my car's headlights and the occasional passing vehicle. The radio played softly in the background, a late-night talk show discussing the mysteries of the universe. I had been driving for hours, making my way back home after a business trip. The monotony of the journey had lulled me into a trance-like state, my thoughts drifting to the upcoming weekend and plans with friends. That's when I noticed it, a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror, drawing closer. At first, I thought nothing of it, assuming it was just another traveler making their way through the night. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized the car was tailing me, maintaining a consistent distance regardless of my speed. A sense of unease settled in. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the car continued to follow, its presence becoming more ominous with each passing mile. Deciding to test my theory, I took a sudden exit, leading to a smaller, less traveled road. To my dismay, the car followed, its headlights now glaringly bright in the darkness. Panic surged through me. Who were they? What did they want? I reached for my phone, intending to call the police, but to my horror, I realized I had no signal. The isolation of the desert, which had once seemed so serene, now felt suffocating. Desperate to lose my pursuer, I floored the gas pedal, my car roaring to life as I sped down the windy road. The mysterious car kept pace, never faltering, its headlights casting eerie shadows on the barren landscape. Up ahead, I spotted a gas station, its neon sign flickering in the distance. Relief washed over me. I could seek help, find shelter, but as I drew closer, I realized the station was abandoned, its windows boarded up, and the pumps long since dry. With a sinking feeling, I knew I had to keep moving. The road ahead split into two, and on a whim, I took the left fork, leading deeper into the desert. The terrain became rougher, with large rocks and dunes making navigation challenging. But still, the car followed, its persistence unwavering. Hours seemed to pass, the chase place becoming a nightmarish game of cat and mouse. My fuel gauge was nearing empty, and I knew I couldn't keep this up much longer. In a last-ditch effort, I veered off the road, driving into the vast desert. The car's tires struggled to gain traction on the sandy terrain, but I pushed on, hoping to find some semblance of cover. Finally, I spotted a cluster of large boulders and quickly maneuvered my car behind them, killing the engine and lights. I crouched low, trying to control my breathing, praying the car would pass by. Minutes felt like hours as I waited in the darkness, straining to hear any sign of movement. Just when I thought I was in the clear, the sound of an engine roared to life, followed by blinding headlights. The car had found me. I braced myself for the worst, but to my surprise, the car sped past, its occupant seemingly unaware of my hiding spot. I waited for what felt like an eternity before cautiously emerging, my heart still racing. With my fuel nearly depleted, I made my way back to the main road, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. The mysterious car was nowhere in sight, its presence now just a haunting memory. I finally reached a populated area, pulling into a diner to gather my thoughts and refuel. The waitress, seeing my disheveled state, offered a sympathetic smile and a hot cup of coffee. As I recounted my harrowing ordeal to her, she listened intently, her expression growing more serious. "You're lucky," she said. "There have been stories of people going missing on that stretch of road. Some say it's a gang looking for easy targets, while others believe it's something more sinister." That night had a profound impact on my daily life. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at the slightest of sounds. Night drives, which I once enjoyed, became a source of anxiety. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror sent my heart racing, memories of that relentless pursuit flooding back. Ashley, my roommate, noticed the change in my demeanor. "You've been distant lately," she remarked one evening as we sat in our living room. I hesitated, then decided to confide in her about the harrowing chase in the desert. She listened intently, her face a mix of concern and disbelief. "That's terrifying," she whispered when I finished. "But you know, there might be a way to find out who was behind it." Ashley worked as a tech analyst and had a knack for digging up information online. With my permission, she began her investigation, starting with local news articles and police reports related to incidents on that stretch of highway. Days turned into weeks, and Ashley's search yielded some disturbing findings. There had been multiple reports of similar chases over the past year, all involving a mysterious car tailing lone drivers in the dead of night. Some had managed to escape, like I had, while others weren't so lucky. Their cars were found abandoned, the drivers never to be seen again. The pattern was clear, and the implications chilling. We were dealing with a serial predator, one who had evaded capture for far too long. Ashley's next step was to track down survivors, hoping their testimonies would provide clues. Through online forums and support groups, she managed to connect with 3 individuals, each with their own harrowing tale. We organized a meeting, choosing a public place for safety. As we sat around a table, sharing our experiences, a pattern began to emerge. The car, the pursuit, the tactics, all bore striking similarities. But the most chilling revelation came when we compared the dates of our encounters. They were all spaced exactly 2 months apart, suggesting a calculated modus operandi. Armed with this information, we approached the local police. While initially skeptical, the weight of our collective testimonies and Ashley's findings was hard to ignore. A task force was set up, with the goal of apprehending the perpetrator. The next scheduled date was approaching, and a plan was hatched. Using a decoy, the police hoped to lure the predator into a trap. I volunteered, feeling a sense of responsibility and a burning desire for closure. The night of the operation was tense. I drove down the familiar stretch of highway, the police hidden from view but close by. Hours passed, and just when we were about to call it off, a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The chase was on. With the police in pursuit, the mysterious car was finally cornered and forced to a stop. The driver, a middle-aged man with cold, emotionless eyes, was arrested. A search of his car revealed a cache of weapons and restraints, leaving no doubt about his sinister intentions. The subsequent trial was swift, with the weight of evidence and testimonies against him. He was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring he'd never pose a threat again. The ordeal brought the survivors closer, forging a bond forged in adversity. We started a support group, helping others who had faced trauma, turning our negative experiences into a force for good. Today, as I drive down the highway, the memories of that night still linger, but they're no longer a source of fear. Instead, they serve as a reminder of resilience, of the strength that comes from unity, and the importance of standing up against the darkness. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.